Boom. What's up, fam? Anthony Johnson here today, co-founder of the Redman Group, founder of 21 Studios, 21 Convention, 22 Convention, 21 University, 10,000 other things on the internet. And today I got with me, special guest Pat Stedman, returning guest to the show, alumni speaker of 21 Summit, 21 Convention, and the 22 Convention. He's been on the Redman Group several times before. You can go and search on 21 Studios or the Redman Group channels. Search Pat Stedman in the channel. You'll pull up all his speeches, interviews I've done with him previously, podcasts, stuff like that. Awesome guy. And before we get into today's show, I want to mention too, though, you'll see that we're going to pull this up. We'll put it up in a minute. But anyway, he's America's most wanted dating coach. And we'll look at some basics of why that is. It's my title I thought up. I thought it was very funny, very accurate to some things that have happened in his life, unfortunately. But also, I want to show you guys that today's show is sponsored by this brand new hat, Make Men Alpha Again. I'll be launching it later today on the 21 store. It's going to be fucking awesome. You should get it. So you can go to the21store.com, support the show, support the channel. You can also check out 21studios.com. Just hit 21 store, and it'll pull you right to it. Got all our hats there. Make women great again. Make women pregnant again. Make men strong again. Make women cook again. Make women virgins again. Toxic masculinity. All your fan favorites. They're fucking dope. Wear it in public. It pisses people off, particularly feminists and shit like that. Like I said, Pat is pretty famous for some stuff that happened in 2021, last year, all this crap. It hit mainstream news, New York Post, NBC News, stuff like that. Dating strategists busted by the FBI. In my opinion, it's a bunch of nonsense. But it has been amazing to see this stuff hit the news and the fake news media's fervor to attack patriotic Americans. As far as Pat and his actual career and what he does, you can find him at patstedman.com. He has a bunch of content here, a blog that's awesome, a newsletter that's even better. You should definitely join it. He does one-on-one coaching, which I've done myself with him. He's like one of the only people in the world I've ever actually paid coaching for. The guy is that fucking good, that fucking dope. He also has a masterclass that's pretty cool. You can check that out on his site at this button right here, this big orange thing. And you should definitely check it out. It's super dope. I've heard a lot of good things about it. And I think you'll like it a lot. Anyway, without further ado, and selling you guys a bunch of hats to support the show, please welcome to the show, Mr. Pat Stedman. What's up, bro?
How's it going, Anthony? It's good to see you, man.
Yeah, you too, man. Welcome back to the show. It's been a little while. I think since last year, I probably haven't had you in the show in probably 6 to 9 months, something like that. It's good to have you back.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
Yeah. So, man, what's new with you? Looks like at minimum you got your website completely revamped, brand new.
Yeah.
What else is new?
Yeah, we're gradually professionalizing my business. I've run a successful business, but as my sort of business coach has told me, like unnecessarily playing the game on hard, just not really having. It's been very bespoke, word of mouth, and we've now started to get things more set up for expansion, which is great. And so, yeah, finally, the website's fixed after being a total dilapidated mess. The thing is, like, the content was always good, but the presentation and the marketing, not so much. So we're doing better with that now.
Yeah, dude, it looks super dope. Like 100% professional, like way better than, I guess, the one you had before. I know it is, dude. You have an old WordPress site that's been sitting around for 10 years. And you keep posting blogs on it and shit. I know.
The tech guy was like, "What on earth?" like the site was barely functioning. So yeah, no, it's good. But aside from that, I got a daughter.
Yeah.
We're just looking down the line to keep expanding the family. Pump out those babies.
Polish babies, Polskas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
My wife's Polish is what he's referring to for the
I actually forgot to mention this, that you're this Chad alpha male patriarch and you're a husband and a father, and it's pretty dope. And your wife's beautiful. She's not a fat old pig like a lot of Manosphere wives, which is great. I love it. It's results in real life. Like, you have this beautiful wife, makes beautiful babies and stuff. She's very feminine, very sweet. And I wanted to mention that too, actually. Let me get this out of the way, that you're a pioneer, in my view. You deserve like a presidential medal of integrity and truth for going after intellectual fraud in the manosphere before even I did. And I was also like one of the first. And I think that's one of the most important things you've done, is not only coach men and help men, discover a lot of great ideas about dating and relationships, and avoid a lot of toxic negativity, but you've actually exposed and been on the offense for guys who are charlatans and don't mean well, and they're predators and frauds and shit like that. And you were doing it back in like 2016, 2017, like in the olden days at this point.
Yeah, just for people who are, I know that, like the Red Man Group and everything is more of a YouTube sort of business. But on Twitter, you kind of had the manosphere that was brought on the Twitter from Mike Cernovich, and then everything was kind of pulled in with the 2016 election. When Mike went pretty much full time into politics, there was a big vacuum that was created, and Rollo filled that vacuum. And so suddenly all the manosphere content like started to revolve around Rollo. And I kept an open mind. Like I didn't just dismiss it out of hand, and I engaged with the article. I read his book. I read some of his posts, and I came to the conclusion by midway through 2017 that this stuff was flawed, and I addressed it initially in a constructive, proactive way, saying, "Hey, this isn't really good for men or women." Because look, this is my perspective on it, is that what Rollo does is really fuels feminism. He's the inverse of feminism. It doesn't create a positive, constructive pathway for men to be leaders, to be patriarchs, right? It's really just a bunch of whiny shit.
Yeah.
And it actually, the subtext of it is that women are the problem and that men are like oppressed by women, and it creates this oppression loop. So anyway, but I was trying to be constructive, like, hey, let's expand on this idea. Maybe we take it this direction. And rather than have any sort of good faith engagement with the arguments, which were very well received by a lot of people because it was refreshing, I was labeled purple pill, right?
Oh,
Which I didn't know what the fuck that meant.
You're
Yeah,
patient zero of the purple pill. Okay.
yeah. And so anyway, we started to have a lot of back and forth arguments and whatnot, and really humiliated him over and over and over again, until finally that led to me being blocked at the very end of 2017. He refused to be in a debate. He said, well, like people kept saying you guys should have a debate, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. Set it up.
Well, he is the science, though. He's the science. You can't argue with science.
Science.
Don't you understand? You don't understand. He's the science, bro.
Alexander Cortez offered to moderate, and he was very neutral during this whole thing at that time.
Yeah.
And and Rollo refused to do it. And look, it all speaks for itself. Gradually, the consciousness changed. I know Anthony really made a big push with that, purifying, a jihad in the manosphere against this stuff. And
thanks, man.
And look, I think everybody's better for it. Obviously, they still lurk, but like vermin, they've crawled to their little corners, and the light continues to sanitize them. So we just keep spreading more light into not only the weakness of the ideas, but simply the hypocrisy of the individuals involved. And those two things, of course, always go together. You don't have weak ideas and strong men. Doesn't actually happen. These guys are all fucking losers. And the reality is that if you met any of them in real life, like a lot of guys see some bravado behind the screen, and they think, oh wow, these guys are the real deal. They're real alpha. Like if you get in the presence of these people, they can't maintain eye contact. They have a really squirmy attitude to them.
Slimy.
Yeah, slimy attitude.
Yeah, so the Rhinestones and Rollery, Rollery Tommaso is the same way.
Yeah,
I've heard women who met him describe him as an alien. Like the minute he left the room, like it's that bad. And
yeah, well,
it's insane how different it is versus the online caricature that these people are led to believe is true. It's just like politicians, like that are doing lines of coke and banging gay hookers, like that governor dude. What's his name? Andrew Gillum.
Yeah.
But then the public facing persona is family man. I'm a good father, and it's like the two worlds are complete opposites.
Yeah, it's an inversion. And,
Yeah.
without going into the sort of moral stuff, evil, bad people tends to be a complete inversion. They
Yeah.
pretend to be one thing when they're the complete opposite. And yeah, you bring up a really good point here, which is that even aside from, how these people are as men, right? Um, when what's really jarring, I mean, these are people who are talking about women,
Mhm.
but do they actually even do well with women?
No,
You know,
zero.
I mean, women are completely unattracted to them. And so,
Repulsed. Repulsed.
yeah, repulsed.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And so when women are repulsed by a guy, why are you listening to him on advice?
Yeah.
Anyway, unfortunately, a lot of the guys who follow these charlatans are really not looking to improve with women anyway. They're just looking for someone who's going to validate their experience as a victim.
Yeah.
And so,
Soothe their emotions, kind of pet them almost like a dog or something. Like you're a beta loser. It's okay. You can stay a beta loser. Like just take this fake red pill and you can feel better about being a beta loser.
it's exactly right. And this is why I bring it back to the point that they are really feminists in the same sense for men.
Mm.
They're feminists for men because what do feminists do? I mean, feminists do the same shit with women. They tell women it's okay to be fat, ugly, not take care of yourself, have a bad attitude, and that it's not, your fault. It's
Yeah.
like, no, of course it's your fault.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I put it as it's kind of like eating, like in nutrition. Like
Yeah.
there's all these stupid fucking lies that have been going around, a lot of which have been propped up by the government, the food pyramid, like all this crap and school lunches for kids. And there's just all sorts of nonsense the government's been pushing out, and huge corporations that are invested in corn and soy and wheat have put out for decades. And as a young American, you're not responsible for that shit being put out, but you're responsible for eating the poison, and it's your responsibility to stop eating this poison, whether it's information or it's actually like going into your mouth. And so if you're fat fuck, like ultimately it's your fault, even
Yeah.
if you're not responsible for the propagation of the lies and the pushing of it. Like feminism too. Like I'm not responsible for feminism at 33 years old being this insane shit show. Most of my adult life, by far, I pushed against it, but I'm still responsible for rejecting these like stupid ideas that, like the things you talk about in your newsletter, men oneitis and this kind of like fairy tale bullshit that men believe about relationships and women are just angels. There's no darker side to women.
Mhm.
So it's like Sean Smith's been going against. He's been criticizing the red pill more openly in the past few months, saying there's some good ideas and utility to it. And the real red pill, not the roll-up pill, which is different, but
Sure.
like the actual red pill community that you're familiar with and me. But also, there's a lot of like really toxic fucking shit in it, and so men need to be much more discerning for sifting through this stuff. I,
Well,
I was
go
going to
go
say
ahead.
DDJ too, or someone I think he's been on the
Mhm.
show a lot. He
Yeah.
calls it the red pill blind spot.
Mhm.
Basically, because the manosphere and whether it's MGTOW or the red pill community or whatever, because they push against the mainstream narrative of feminism, which is like overtly fucking retarded, men are much more prone to automatically, like very automated, like low quality thinking, believing whatever these charlatans say, just because they're correct in pushing against feminism. And it's like this cognitive laziness to just accept whatever is against the mainstream. And it's like you need to be a lot more thoughtful than that, than just like, this guy says feminism sucks, he must be legit. Like, come on, man.
Well, we say in politics today that with the parties, it's two wings of the same bird,
Yeah.
right? It's the same thing with the red pill and feminism. Unfortunately, a lot of guys are stupid, or at least they need to develop their discernment more. And so it's exactly as you say. It's no different than you have some, you know, conservative guy who believes, you have some total charlatan in politics that goes like Lindsey Graham, who
Yeah.
says, like, I support America. The left spends too much money. It's like, okay, wow, I support that. That means he's a good guy. It's like, no, it doesn't mean that.
Yeah.
They're selling you their own version of bullshit, and you get caught in this paradigm, and that actually fuels it. That's why, if we are going to defeat feminism, you have to actually rise above feminism. You
Yeah.
can't you can't meet it at its same level of victimization.
Yeah.
But look, it's also just a matter of the kind of people it attracts. Though I do think that as we spread more and more light, we'll pull more and more guys away from it. But the reality is that if you have someone like Stone, I mean, Rianne has an extremely low IQ. I mean, like, I don't, when I would have arguments with Rianne, it was very difficult to even, he didn't have the reading comprehension to
let's
be
just
able
call
to.
him Rihanna Stone.
Yeah, Rihanna Stone. I mean, he didn't have the reading comprehension to be able to actually. So it's like you'd respond, and then he would. It was like you're at the DMV,
Yeah,
and you explain that this is an identification. They say, well, no, it's not because of this. Like
yeah.
they can't read the piece of paper. They don't understand it. Like that's how it is with Rihanna. So I mean, Rihanna, right? So if you're gonna follow someone like that, you have to be even stupider.
So hang on, I want to clarify. You're claiming, and I support this claim if I'm accurate here, Rianne Stone is the DMV of the manosphere.
He's a DMV of the manosphere, 100%.
Okay. I love it.
100%.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Sub 90 IQ, no question about it.
Yeah, he's like that in real life. Like he's kind of retarded, and he told me his girlfriend or his wife. I think she became his like piggy wife. He said she was a cokehead at a party. Is how he met her. That's literally what he told me on the Redman group one time. So it's like these guys, and he wifed her up for some reason. I guess true love is true love or whatever. I'm not going to get in the way of marrying a cokehead, but I will make fun of it. Mm-hmm. And she's also very overweight and stuff like that. She's not as big as the official Miss Piggy of the Manosphere, but it's very consistent. Like you're saying, these dudes are dumb or hypocrites or fraudulent. And then if you look at their wives and girlfriends in real life, the women run them, and then they're all fat and they're all usually really old. Yeah, and it's every time. I mean, it's that retarded. You have the single mom experts and all this kind of shit.
But yeah, I mean, I make that comment about Rianne though, just almost actually to give him a little bit of a pass. Like I don't think he even understands enough to be able to think beyond that sort of black and white thing. Rollo is not stupid. Yeah. Rollo isn't stupid. I mean, so he's just disingenuous. I
think Rollo is also like mentally ill. Like I mean it. Yeah, he's been ranting and raving lately about pathological personalities verbatim. There's one video where he was bitching about me for like 2 hours just recently, and he probably said pathological personality like 50 to 100 times. And it's like this is such overt projection of someone who is a pathological personality. You need like extensive one-on-one therapy with an actual clinical psychologist. You're clearly a fucking narcissist. You're never wrong. You won't debate anybody who thinks that you're wrong, which is like the definition of an honest debate. Duh. Yeah. The few times that he does, he's debated Dr. Sean Smith and Stefan Molyneux. They both ran circles around him and basically made him cry. You can see his face in these interviews. Actually, the physiology of it, he gets more and more butthurt. Like every 10 minutes, you can see like he just tightens up and gets all fucking pissy because he's like a little girl who's like losing this debate and he can't handle it. He can't just say, "Oh, I was wrong about that," or "Let me look more into that because I'm going to double back on what I think because maybe this guy has a point." There's just none of that.
Yeah,
it's a peak retard. Yeah, and what's sad too is because the red pill got quarantined on Reddit. It used to be a lot more diversity of ideas and opinions. There's a lot of guys who hated Rollo long before me or you had any problems with them, and because Reddit, as a big tech kind of company, quarantined it, it really like castrated it. It cut off all the membership and the viewing. It just fucked it all up. It's basically like deleting it or banning it.
Sure.
And Rollo has been trying to push hardcore on YouTube that like he is the red pill. And this is not even remotely accurate. He's always defined it as his own version of the red pill, which is why I call it the Rollo pill, because it was distinct in the manosphere in general and even in the red pill community as being his own thing. And he's been trying to do this switcheroo, this bait and switch on these naive 18-year-old kids on YouTube that just soak up whatever they fucking hear. It's really getting bad.
Yeah.
It's like we should move on to some other topics, but just because I hate the guy, it makes me want to puke just like thinking about him because he's like such a piece of shit.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
No, I mean I completely agree.
Let's get back to dating. Let's get back to dating relationships in the manosphere in a minute. Let's actually move on to something more fun: Ukraine and Russia. I see like all this. So my view of it, my take, and I want to get yours, is like there's just a lot of hardcore simping for Ukraine, and these people like aren't even remotely thinking about what they're being fed. All the propaganda that we see in the West is like super hardcore, one-sided, and that to me just screams like scam. Like when the whole fucking narrative, all the neocons come out of the woodwork, all the neoliberals, these limousine liberals, the Lindsey Grahams, the Mitt Romneys, all the Democrats, all this garbage. Like they're all pushing the like Russia is the devil and Ukraine is like this and Zelensky is like this knight in shining armor. And it's like this is not reality. This is war propaganda in the extreme. And everybody who's been criticizing the government for the past 2 years or whatever on the Kufid stuff, all of a sudden they just believe everything that they're told. Like it's what is it? The Schadenfreude? I can't say it.
Schadenfreude.
Yeah, Schadenfreude. Yeah, I don't know how to fucking pronounce it, but the mental gymnastics people are doing just in the past couple of weeks has been amazing. And even a lot of people who are much more pro-Trump and anti-establishment, anti-deep state, even a lot of those people have been sucked into it. Mm-hmm. And I want to know your kind of take on it and why you think, if you can, there's been even more hardcore simping for Ukraine than there was for Kufid, which is also like retardville USA.
Well, I agree with everything you said. I'm going to give the audience some context and background because most people don't know any of this information, and it's very important. In 2014, the U.S., the CIA, overthrew the democratically elected government of Ukraine. Now, look, I'm not going to pretend that that government was not corrupt. It was corrupt, but the person who was in power was Yanukovych, who was more aligned towards Russia. In Ukraine at that time period was really split 50-50 between wanting to be part of the West and wanting to be part of Russia, or wanting to be integrated with it. It was more a matter of being part of the EU economic zone versus the Eurasian common economic area. So when Yanukovych won again, the CIA did a color revolution, which, very interesting about that. We had our own attempted color revolution here. And let's just say, I think that people were going to be surprised at the levels of similarity between the two things, but we won't get into any more of that. At any rate, they overthrew the government, and it was actually quite a terrible situation. They had snipers shooting civilians in Kiev. They burned over 40 trade unionists who were protesting against the overthrow of the government alive in Odessa. And in response to this overthrow of the government, you saw throughout southeastern Ukraine in particular, not just in Donetsk and Luhansk in the Donbass, but also in Kharkiv, right, the city that's currently under siege right now. They also had their own People's Republic that was formed. And this became, and then of course Russia took Crimea. This became a big thing. The Ukrainian military in 2014 was only about 6,000 men. And so these militias were able to basically get formulated. Anyway, money starts being thrown in from the West to back the Ukrainian military. The Russians start to back these militias. The one in Kharkov was put down. The two in the Donbass managed to sustain themselves. So what people don't understand, they're saying like, oh, the war, 3 weeks ago, this war broke out in Ukraine. That's not true. There's been a war for 8 years. And the Ukrainians have been shelling Donbass indiscriminately, killing civilians. There's been multiple 5 figures worth of people who have died in the Donbass. And the Ukrainian government had the audacity just 2 days ago to post some cheesy, poor civilians being killed in Ukraine when they dropped cluster munitions in a civilian area. The photos they were using were of them killing civilians in the Donbass. Okay. Yeah. So this war's been going on for a while. So now let's fast forward this stuff. And I won't go into some of the more, which I think frankly have some credibility, but theories about the biolabs and what exactly was going on in there. But Ukraine at this point the corruption has gotten worse and worse. And about Biden's involvement with Ukraine, the Clintons' involvement with Ukraine, with Burisma, et cetera. Ukraine, there's been massive financial money laundering through Ukraine, and child sex trafficking. Ukrainian girls being shipped all over the world.
They're beautiful, man. I saw a bunch in Poland. I mean, they're some of the most Ukrainian women and Swedish women are the most beautiful women as a group of every demographic I've ever seen in my life.
And the Ukrainian women are basically the biggest source of white sex trafficking in the entire world. Basically, wow, it's huge. If you go
is Ukraine the center of corruption in like for Western like powers and shit?
Well, yeah, I mean, I can really go down the rabbit hole with people. Everybody talked about those pallets of cash that were shipped from, Trump was talking about this, how Obama gave Iran all
Yeah,
of this cash. And, but what's not really talked about is that that was only a few $1 billion. The most of the money, and it was 486 billion. I mean, that's almost $500 billion, was digitally laundered through Ukraine. And so the levels, and by the way, a lot of this stuff is actually connected to the election fraud. I mean, it's a whole rabbit hole. I can get down all this stuff. I'll try to stay on the more practical things from the perspective of
yeah,
Russia, though. Right. So you have in Ukraine, after this overthrow of the government, Ukraine quite literally has been taken over by Nazis. The Azov battalion, which, by the way, their leader just received the Ukrainian, Medal of Freedom, basically the Hero of Ukraine award.
I saw that.
These guys have SS insignia on them, tattooed onto them. They've crucified people alive, and there's overwhelming evidence corroborated over and over and over again that they are using civilians as shields in the war. And look, you may not like Russia. You don't even have to think the Russians are good or that they care about Ukrainians, which I would dispute, because in their view, the Ukraine is basically like the southern US. It's kind of like you don't really have Russia without the South. If like the United States had been cut in two after the Cold War, if they had lost, it's a kind of similar dynamic for them. But putting aside all that stuff, even just speaking from a completely practical matter, the Russians have no incentive to kill civilians. So when they have this, I'm not saying they haven't killed civilians. Of course they have. It's a war. But in the first 2 weeks of the war, the Russians killed this is by the UN estimates, right? The UN, this is not Russian estimates, killed 561 civilians in the first 2 weeks of the war. We killed 15,000 in Iraq in the first 2 weeks of the war. So if people are like this shock and awe, why hasn't Russia taken over all of Ukraine? They can't move fast enough. Their military is incompetent. I do
Yeah,
think that they made some tactical mistakes, right? I think that they were expecting less resistance than there was. But fundamentally, people also don't understand the Russian strategy, which is to minimize civilian casualties, which means a much less indiscriminate approach.
yeah,
And on top of that, the Russians follow the mindset of Clausewitz, which is that you engage the enemy army. And if you look at how they conducted operations in Syria, they tend to bypass cities. And what they do is they surround the cities, and then they create humanitarian corridors. And the idea behind that is, of course, to get civilians out of the cities, but it's actually also to encourage the desertion of regular army units to sneak out with the civilian population.
uh,
They're actually okay with Ukrainian soldiers deserting. They want Azov, but they don't care about regular Ukrainian soldiers deserting.
I'm just kind of amazed because I've seen this propaganda that you're like referring to here, and it's so fucking obvious and it's so fucking overt. Like for example, killing civilians. Like no shit that happened. It's like even one person getting killed. I'm sorry that happened. Like this is not a good thing. But this is what happens when there's an actual conflict going on. And you're right. America went into Iraq and we ended up killing between Afghanistan and Iraq somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million civilians got killed. Never mind like war combatants and stuff. Like
Yeah.
America's and every place that America's gone into for the past 60 years, a shit ton of people fucking die. This is how wars just fuck. I mean, I'm not even going to excuse that. This is just part of what happens at war, though. And it's like but the mainstream narrative is, oh, they killed some civilians, therefore they're evil. It's like, dude, this is not how fucking real life works. Like, it's like propaganda. The propaganda is for like fucking 10-year-olds. It's like it's that
Well, it
retarded.
is. Well, because the American public, Western public, has been really brought down to the mind of a child, right? They
Yeah,
watch Marvel movies, and everything is in this sort of, okay, who's the hero and who's the villain, and and it's just all caricatures, and they
yeah,
can't think in any sort of realistic terms. The bottom line is that the West was trying to provoke this war with Russia. Russia's terms were extremely, extremely like reasonable. Basically, they wanted Ukraine to be neutral, and they wanted guarantees that it wasn't going to join NATO.
yeah,
And not only were neither of those. Oh, and also this. I mean, this is actually huge. Is that the Ukrainian government has banned the use of Russian. So over half the country speaks Russian, and they won't. And they removed it from all programming. you're not actually allowed to use Russian in any sort of commercial dealings, or it's punishable by law. I mean, they were trying
Wow.
to basically erase all of Russia's connection. And by the way, Ukraine, as its current form is, it was created by the Soviets. And a lot of Russian-speaking areas, Novorossiya, which is the entire south, the eastern portions, those were never historically Ukrainian. They were lumped into this. I mean, Crimea was certainly lumped into it. Khrushchev gave it to Ukraine because his wife was Ukrainian. I mean, it was like literally in the 50s. It was like a gift to his wife.
Wow.
It's so the borders of Ukraine itself are arbitrary. Russia's terms were fairly reasonable. But in the week before the invasion, two things happened. First, three things happened, actually. First, Zelensky went on this big rant talking about how, they needed to join NATO, and no one in NATO disagreed with him. And then he said that they needed to reconsider the 1994 treaty, which was when Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
So then Ukraine was talking about getting nukes, basically. And then that same week, after Russia had pulled its forces back, Ukraine mounted a massive offensive on the Donbass. And so, which would have overrun the Donbass probably. So everybody's like, well, I can't believe Putin, went to war. Like, I don't care. He shouldn't have done it. Well, you know what? I actually think you're probably a pussy because you don't understand what it's like to lead a nation, and you're not willing to take any sort of considerations into your security. Our country, United States, has absolutely zero right to talk about just war. Every single war we have been in since the end of the Cold War has not been a just war.
Yep.
You can
Bingo.
make some arguments perhaps about the initial invasion in Afghanistan, but everything else besides for that.
And by that, you mean like the first year before
Yeah.
I almost said Obama, before Osama left.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Everything after that, the next 19 years have been full retard.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's just absolutely inconceivable that you would, as the leader of Russia, allow this sort of baiting to occur. And the reality is that I think Russia objectively exercised every single diplomatic option they possibly could for 8 years. People were like, well, why didn't they be diplomatic? You guys just have no fucking clue what's going on in the world. You didn't pay attention to it.
I mean, all these people didn't even know, they couldn't find Ukraine on a map a few months ago.
No, they couldn't.
Like all these people, dude, I found a fucking neighbor walking around my neighborhood, big Ukrainian flag on their house. And I'm like, get the fuck out of here. Like it's just one of these, another fucking I've seen like all these people around where I live and shit. Like it's just in Florida. It's just fucking crazy, man. These people are absolute sheep. They don't know shit.
Yeah. And let me just make a little interesting side connection here with Libya, right? So Clinton killed Gaddafi, right? And people kind of wonder what was the real reason for that. Gaddafi, when they got rid of Gaddafi, that's when all the migrant streams to Europe opened up. But what's also more interesting than that is that Gaddafi, when he came into power, he shut down the slave markets. And since he was removed, one of the first things that happened when the Muslim Brotherhood took over the country is that they brought the slave markets back in, where Ukrainian girls are sold as sex slaves. So if you really go down this rabbit hole, you can see all these connections here. But Zelensky, let's look at Zelensky. First off, Zelensky's not even Ukrainian. Okay, he was an actor. He's in drag, actually, as an actor.
Yeah, I've seen.
And from what I can understand, based on some stories that they're trying to get ahead of, there's probably information going to be leaked that he's gay and that he does a lot of that kind of stuff.
Where is he from? Whatever. He's not Ukrainian. What is he?
God, I forget where he's from. But he's not Ukrainian by birth.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually forget the exact location. But at any rate, like, he's an actor. The whole thing is a put on show. But he's not controlling the country. The two, he's being on one hand controlled by the US State Department and Biden because they're trying to cover their tracks and everything. And also on the other hand by the Nazi thugs around him. And they really are Nazis. I mean, sorry. Like everyone's talking about, like punch a Nazi. This is the funniest thing about it is you see all these people who are like allegedly, anti-fascist, hate Nazis. They are now the biggest supporters of the only really true Nazi group in the world.
Yeah.
But look, the bottom line is, regardless of all this stuff, you don't have to, as you can tell from this, from an arguments perspective, I'm a little bit sympathetic to Russia just because I think in terms of realpolitik, they had clear interest here and we continued to provoke them. I mean, when we signed the agreements at the end of the Cold War, it was very clearly stated that we would not expand NATO eastward, and we did that.
But also, you're under no delusion that Putin is not some angel. Like, because I'm
No.
with you on all this stuff, but I'm not stupid. This he's done a lot of rough shit over his life. People have died, whatever. But I believe that I think he has his own interests in mind and the interests of Russia. Actually, I believe that. Like and that's a lot more that can be said about places like leaders of France and Germany and Britain and stuff. Their leaders are all fucking sellouts. Macron and the Germans and Boris. These people are all just fucking puppets for other people, like the Soroses and the Bill Gates of the world.
Well, let's look at it from this perspective. I mean, there's no question Putin's ruthless. I mean, he's killed journalists, jailed opposition people. I mean, he is
like Zelensky.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. So I want people to understand some contrast stuff here. So people saw the other day, there was, people cheering about this, that some woman went on while they were doing a broadcast on Russian news. She held up a sign basically saying, "Stop the war." Okay. What happened to that woman? Oh my God. And, Putin's evil, tyrannical state, she got a $300 fine or a 300 ruble fine, right, for doing it. But in Czech Republic or Slovakia, if you were to have a conversation like this, you'd be sentenced to prison up to 25 years just for publicly talking positively about Russia.
Wow.
They've frozen just people's bank accounts in Britain just because they are Russian. Okay. And let's not forget, prior to all this happening, what were they doing in Canada? What was Trudeau doing in Canada? Freezing dissidents' bank accounts.
Yeah.
Okay. So whatever Putin is, but don't for one single fucking second think that you live in a sovereign, free, democratic country. You do not. You do not.
In America, we have political prisoners right now. There's people arrested for the January 6th stuff, 500 or 550 or so. Yeah. They're political prisoners, in my opinion, of a fucking witch hunt. And this shit is evil and tyrannical, and the founding fathers would be extremely angry, to put it nicely.
America is actually the only Western country that even has any minimal protections, because the Constitution, even though it's being frayed and beaten up, still has some punch behind it.
Yeah,
but
teeth.
In countries that, teeth, but in countries that don't have a constitution, it's literally completely irrelevant. The government can do whatever they want to you, and don't think it's not going to happen. Ukraine just this week, free Ukraine, right? Just implemented literally the World Economic Forum's global reset plan to have all of your identity on a vaccination card that connects it to all your funds. Yeah. They're going to be trying this stuff here. This is the whole idea behind it. And as you were saying, Anthony, all the stuff with COVID was reaching a boiling point, and how these guys work, they're kind of magicians in their own sense. So they get your energy up, they get you all pissed off, and then they redirect your energy in the way that they want it to go. So everybody was getting really, really angry at their governments. They've been cooped up for 2 years. And then the government's getting more and more harsh and tyrannical. And then all of a sudden, it's now on Putin. Putin's the bad guy.
Look over here. Look over here. This hand. Yeah. Direct your anger at some guy across the world with a proxy war that has nothing to do with you, that you didn't even give a fuck about a few months ago.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, I think, important to be said. You don't have to, you can disregard all my arguments if you want to about Putin, whatever. If you don't think, I still don't think it was right that Russia invaded Ukraine. Okay, fine, whatever. I don't care. You can have that consideration. The reality, though, is, what does it have to do with us? Does it have anything to do with us whatsoever?
What does it have to do with the Russian people too, who are being penalized aggressively? The whole West right now, at minimum, is trying to bankrupt this country. They're trying regime change there's leaders in America like Lindsey Graham calling for the assassination of Putin. All the services getting cut off. Who gives a fuck about Netflix, but it's way beyond that. it's credit cards, bank processing. Like this is a war on the Russian people that had nothing to do with this, basically, right? Like
Yeah,
this is fucking retarded.
and of course, their intention was to get Putin out of power, but all it's done is backed up his support, because then even Russians who didn't like Putin are like, well, wait a minute, they don't really hate Putin, they hate Russia, they hate me.
Yeah,
And so now everybody's behind it. I want to make a point here, because you brought up the economic stuff, which is really, really important.
yeah.
A lot of people have asked, why didn't Russia do any of this stuff in 2014 when the Ukrainian military was like, tiny and everything? Well, I think first off, aside from the optics and trying to give diplomacy a chance, I mean, the Ukrainians never agreed or abided by the Minsk Accords, or the Minsk II Accords, which basically had to deal with the conflict in the Donbass, and which would have allowed them actually to keep the Donbass just as an autonomous region, which they refused. They've refused everything constantly with negotiations. They've refused it. But back in 2014, Russia was very, very integrated with the global economy and very fragile. And so they could have really gotten knocked out. In the last 8 years, Putin has gradually reduced his holdings of US treasuries and has increased his holdings of gold, actually even silver too, and Bitcoin even. Russia was prepared economically for this. So you hear all this stupid shit in the media about how the sanctions are killing Russia and everything. No, it's not. I mean, look, are they facing some tough times? Sure, their inflation, they have inflation now. The value of the ruble dropped, but the public is aware of it. The government stabilized it. There's no bank runs. They prevented all that stuff. And the reality is that in 6 to 12 months, Russia is going to be completely fine, because Russia has spent time building alliances across the world, making its case very clear. China is completely on board with Russia. And by the way, so is Saudi Arabia, so is the UAE, so is Brazil, so is India,
India,
so is
yeah.
Venezuela, right? We were so pathetic, we had to go to Venezuela, because by the way, Russian oil and Venezuelan oil are of the same style. Like, you might ask, why do we have to get Russian oil? We were getting Russian oil to replace Venezuelan oil because it's a medium crude, which refineries you can't just like substitute it with light crude from Saudi Arabia. So then we tried to go back to Venezuela. All these countries are basically saying, fuck you. The West is run by degenerates who are frankly criminally insane.
Yep.
And even though I think the CCP is an evil scum country, and even though you can say Russia's more of an autocratic state, they're at least run by sane individuals. We are not run by sane individuals.
Yeah, the people running America and Canada and Britain are like suicidal in a way.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
nationally suicidal for globalism or whatever the fuck they want to promote, the WF crap. I think they're genocidal too, to be honest.
No, 100%. 100%. I mean, they want to kill 13 out of 14 people. They've said that, but whatever. The whole point here, though, is that their intent to hurt Russia is only going to lead to the collapse of the dollar as the world reserve currency. And that is happening. That is imminent. It's going to happen over the next few months.
I think what you're saying too is that if I can reframe it, like what America has done and NATO and other Western nations, they're setting up by intention or stupidity a multipolar world where the dollar is no longer the reserve currency, where America is no longer kind of the leader, all this kind of stuff. Like they're setting up almost the preconditions for a real World War III. Not even from a hot war, not even from an immediate hot war that's possible now with like a no-fly zone, but literally setting up alliances, pushing Russia to be allied with China and shit like that. And that to me is like super crazy and super dangerous, because like World War III could be easily the end of the world, way faster than anything else.
This is, in my understanding, so they've been stealing money from the United States for years, and Catherine Austin Fitts has some interesting stuff with this. And if you go down the rabbit hole even more so, kind of with 9/11, et cetera. At any rate, they've been stealing money for years from the United States and moving it overseas, moving it into black budgets. And so the debt of the US has been going up and up and up. And they basically, by the late 90s, they understood that they had fucked this country to such a degree that, with the pension funds all getting moved up, being basically emptied, put in markets and stuff like that, that are that are like ephemeral, right? They don't actually have value. They're never going to be able to be sustained. They realized that they had bankrupted the country. And so what they're doing now is they're trying to collapse it, but give a reason for its collapse that isn't them, and then to use the collapse to move things to the central bank digital currencies, right? Which is called like an evil Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin is decentralized, limited amount, right, deflationary, and non-censorable or controllable, the CBDCs are centralized, unlimited production, and completely controllable. They can shut it off. They can tell you, you only have 2 burgers you can have per month. The rest of your burgers have to be bug burgers, right? This is literally stuff the World Economic Forum has put out. You can watch videos on it. Like they've done their own presentations. It's not a fucking conspiracy theory. It's their own fucking presentations. Wake up, people. Wake the fuck up.
It's like the evolution of fiat currency. It's like the next level of fiat retard shit.
Except there's no way out of it.
Yeah.
If that becomes implemented, it really is game over for the planet, because they can shut off your ability to eat or do anything. And so anyway, the war is a convenient way to kind of collapse the entire Western system that they have already hollowed out from the inside. So the only thing that I'm becoming, unfortunately, more convinced that there is going to be some kinetic action, because all this propaganda about Ukraine winning and doing well, and how Russia's planning on doing a chemical weapons attack. That's all the kind of shit that they do to pre-plan a false flag.
Yep.
I think there's going to be some false flag like that. And then that's going to be used as justification for NATO to come in. And Russia will hit NATO troops. Absolutely. NATO troops cross the border into Ukraine. They're going to get hit with cruise missiles. And if you were to game this out, I'm not saying that Russia's military is stronger than NATO's military. It's not. But Russia would be prepared to lose 1 million people in this war. And you're going to see Western countries revolt when 10,000 people are dead. I mean, we have zero will or capacity to fight this right now.
Russians too have a history of fighting like these kind of crazy odds. Like they lost millions of men in World War II, way more than like America and Britain did.
The low estimates of what Russia lost was 24 million people in World War II.
I mean combatants though, not like you're talking more about like genocide and famine and shit like that, right?
No, I'm talking about combatants. 24 million. Combatants.
I didn't know.
They lost a further 20 million civilians.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild. 20 million people, in insane numbers of people. They lost more than all of Western Europe combined.
I think this is why too America is so. It's one of the reasons America, the boomers, whatever, all the way through now, even before them, were so insulated from like the real consequences of what Europe went through, and Russia and China. Like these people have lost. America lost so little in World War II. Like nobody's. Europe was blown to smithereens. There was genocide. There was massive war. There was famine. There was cannibalism. Like none of that shit was happening in Kansas and Texas. Have you heard about mass cannibalism and genocide in Arkansas? No. Like this country has been so our grandparents, even people who went to war, they saw a lot more obviously up close. Like my grandfather was in World War II, but this is just like it's nothing compared to what these people have been through. They lost tens and tens of millions of people, a lot of these countries, all the way through. So it's like China killed 54 million Chinese, starving them to death. There was the Holodomor, like the genocide. Like America's just, and Canada too, just so fucking insulated, and I think it's really had consequences. Not only geopolitically and politically within our own countries, but all the way down to like masculinity and femininity and shit. That's why it's part of why things have gotten so fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And rant. But
no, 100%, 100%. I mean, America lost more people in the Civil War than it did in every other war it fought combined. So you go back to 1860 and 1861. I mean, the population of the U.S. was, I think, about 7 million in the South, and it was like maybe 3 times that in the North, 3 to 4 times that in the North. I mean, and we lost about 600,000 people throughout the entire course of the war. More than, World War II, we lost, I think, only 300,000. Is that right? 200,
a couple, something like that. Yeah, it's a couple 100,000.
Something like that. I mean, the point is that with the exception of the Civil War, which was incredibly brutal in this country, we have not really experienced pain in a war. And
by the way, the modern equivalent of the Civil War deaths is something like 6 or 7 million now. So
yeah,
if those amount of people died today in an American Civil War, it would be the death of like 7 million Americans, which is
especially in the
insane.
South. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think at the end of the Civil War, 1 out of 3 men between the age of 20 and 40 in the South were either killed or wounded, and 1 out of 10 in the North were killed or wounded.
And cities are burnt to the ground in the South and shit. Like all kinds of crazy shit happened. Yeah.
Yeah, it was absolutely brutal. So, we're not going to have the stomach for that fight. The only thing that I feel positive about with the situation is that I don't expect it's going to get nuclear, and the reason is twofold. Well, first off, the Pentagon does not want this war. This is being driven by like the State Department and the CIA and stuff like that. The Pentagon keeps shooting stuff down. Not that they won't get dragged into it. They obviously have their lackeys there, but and I have my own kind of theories about some of this stuff, but I'll just suffice to say, I don't believe that ballistic missile command has given access to Biden. And there's a lot of evidence of this. And so I don't believe that sort of core group, which is the only part of the military that is not infiltrated and is heavily, like highly, highly professional, the most serious people who deal with the nuclear weapons, Trump shut them up in Cheyenne Mountain on March 15th, 2020, out of an abundance of caution because we may already be at war yet. And Cheyenne Mountain has not opened up since to the outside world. So they knew some shit was going on with the release of COVID. But at any rate, I think that some of that idea about kind of what's been going on with this regime has trickled through the ranks. The Pentagon's becoming, especially after Afghanistan, they're becoming more and more, pulling back more and more. And frankly, though, even if all that stuff I'm saying isn't true, at the end of the day, nuclear forces of Russia and the United States are in constant conversation with each other. They're always communicating. So whatever else happens on the ground with, conventional weaponry and stuff like that, those two groups are very, very serious, and they're talking to each other. And I'm telling you that if Biden were to tell American nuclear forces to fire a nuclear weapon, they would not listen. I don't actually think that they even recognize him because he wasn't even carrying he was carrying his own briefcase, like this is something that indicates that there wasn't really a handoff of that material to him. Which,
It's
by the
probably
way,
like ice cream in the suitcase too. Like,
yeah, exactly.
chocolate chip.
As if he could even remember how to put the codes in anyway.
Yeah.
But to be honest, people think it's a matter of like, oh, the president types in the code and they fire the missiles. That's not how it works. Since 1954, they have all sorts of protocols. It's a handshake agreement. The president sends a message to nuclear command to launch, and then the generals in nuclear command use their own judgment to decide, is the president compromised? Is there, and they have all sorts of protocols that have been in place since 1954 to deal with this in the event of like a Manchurian candidate kind of situation. So anyway.
Yeah, which we've kind of had nonstop with a few exceptions for a long time. Yeah. So let's move on. Let's move back to dating and stuff. It's fun talking about this because it's such a huge. Well, I don't want to make light of the fact that there's people suffering and dying, but the stupidity of it all on the American side and the West side and all the simping. It's so sad too. If we can close it out, like I want to get your thoughts on this real quick. There's a lot of MAGA people that Trump Republicans, so to speak. I'm not really a Trump Republican. I'm more of like a Ron Paul Republican, but I love Trump and I love what he's done. And I'm looking forward to seeing. I saw him recently in Orlando. It's always super cool seeing him in person. The light, the energy of that guy, man.
It's crazy.
But even like the Sebastian Gorkas and a lot of other people that I kind of liked, it's like they've just been hyper simping for Ukraine. Totally in alliance with like the Hillary Clintons and the Lindsey Grahams and the CNNs and the MSNBC. It's like, it's pathetic.
Yeah.
I really didn't expect the simping to be so hard and so fast. It's like they have like cognitive whiplash from it. They came around so fast on this. and it makes me sick. Like
Yeah.
it shows you how entrenched neocon thinking is, even beyond neocon individuals and the neoliberals and the uniparty. Like it's demoralizing almost in a way. That's how bad it's been, for in my opinion, to see. There's a couple of people like Ian Smith, for example, one of our own speakers, who's running for Congress in New Jersey. Fuck yeah.
I see him all the time. He runs my gym.
Yeah, I love that guy. Yeah, he's amazing. Yeah, yeah. We actually just edited a speech. It's actually on the channel now. It's not public yet, but we got it done. But yeah, he's one of the few, and there's a couple people like him that have been consistently like Ukraine. All this Ukraine shit is retarded. But have you seen that too? Like a lot of people that you supported and liked have just like turned tail on this shit, like retards.
Well, I don't know to what extent. Like my personal opinion is that to varying degrees, you're looking at 80 to 90% of Congress being compromised.
Easy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can say how badly are all of them compromised? There's maybe only 20% are true, like evil scum in on everything. Other ones are maybe just blackmailed because they did this or that. But
whether there's weak cowards, like
they are.
I don't discount that.
No, not 100%, 100%. For the Republican Party, even aside from any beliefs that this is just all orchestrated, they make so much of their money from the military industrial complex. And I mean, just the donations pour in whenever there's a war, right? Because defense contractors make boatloads of money. So there's enormous amounts of corruption with the whole thing. I do think many of them will start to pull back because there just isn't any support in the American public for it. I mean, I would say probably about a third of the country is maybe you think I'm being generous, but I do think about a third of the country is to varying degrees of where we're at with it. And then another third of the country is like, oh my God, Ukraine, need to send, nuclear weapons over there, immediately, whatever, just idiots. But this other third of the country hates Putin, thinks the invasion is bad, but does not want to get involved in the war regardless.
Yeah.
And the Republican Party is completely covered up by like 90% of the Republican Party, 95% does not want to go to the war, regardless of whether they think that, there's some justification for it and Ukraine's corrupt, or whether or not they just hate Putin, but they don't want to get involved in a foreign war. So the Republicans are not going to be able to sustain this for a super long period of time, especially because, and I'll just end on this little coda here with the economics of this stuff. If this goes to the next level, what the West did with these economic sanctions is unprecedented. Seizing a central bank's currency, absolutely unprecedented. And they create the situation. Now they're saying in the media, well, Russia's defaulting. Well, Russia said, well, you can pay them with the dollars that you have that you froze, or if they won't do that, we'll pay you in rubles. But neither of those things are being allowed by Western sanctions. So it's like a force majeure situation that Russia is trying to pay, but it can't. And so what ends up happening is that probably a lot of these creditors are going to go against the Western countries because they're the ones who are preventing them from getting paid. But more than this, the amount of trust that's been destroyed, like the financial system's built on trust, and all that trust has just been obliterated. And you put Russia in a situation where they could have retaliated even further, but they haven't done that yet. But if war breaks out, you better believe that they're going to cut off the oil and gas to Europe. And Germany is like over 90% run on Russian energy. So it's at a certain point, it becomes not even a matter of cost. They just simply won't have any gas or fuel to run the entire country. Can you imagine every single industry in Germany is going to shut down? There's not going to be any fuel. There's not going to be, prices of everything are going to go through the roof. I mean, fertilizer and food, Russia and Ukraine and Kazakhstan and Belarus account for over a third of the global production of wheat and fertilizer. I mean, this stupidity is unbelievable. We are going to get gas in the United States at $9 per gallon, but US is going to look pretty compared to Europe. Europe is totally, completely fucked. And when people realize that this war, Russia is prepared to take pain, but they're not just mentally prepared, they are economically prepared to do it. We are not. This whole paper tiger is going to collapse big time. And when that happens, I do think you are going to start to see more of this energy get redirected back against Western governments from the population. So
Good. I fucking hate most of our government, so I'm all about it. I think at minimum 90% of the federal government needs to be abolished. Like, and that's just talking about America. Never mind the state governments and then Canada and all that shit.
And by the way, just for anybody watching this is just something I see happening. I'm not endorsing it, right? Just something I see happening for any of the
Anybody watching, yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of people that stalk the manosphere now. There was like a Secret Service, public report that came out a couple days ago. I'm of course preparing an open letter to my governor, my attorney general, my state, my senators, Rick Scott, Marco Rubio, a couple other people. I'm sick and tired of the manosphere being this, hostile propaganda to, demonize this wonderful, positive community for men and fathers. So I'm sick of it. Yeah, if they're watching, they can suck my balls and eat shit, etc.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's still a free country. You still have freedom of speech.
Yeah, and I'm going to use it. Let's talk about some other issues though from your newsletter you've been bringing up. I want to get into some more fun stuff like sex, masturbation, cheating, Tinder. Like, you talk about a lot of great shit in newsletters, man. It's a content newsletter. It's fucking fantastic. Most newsletters are just like information garbage to sell you shit. And your shit's just dope. It's mostly just like how to live a better life as a man and understand various issues. Talk to me about Tinder. Like, how have you seen Tinder evolve over the years and as it relates to the dating marketplace, the sexual marketplace? COVID, obviously, the COVID phenomena shut down a lot of bars and clubs, which were traditional places people met. Even as, in the pickup artist community, this is a big thing. That's where I learned game. Back before, being a keyboard jockey was the goal in the manosphere. You could actually go out and do hundreds and thousands of approaches, cold approaches in real life. That's what I did. I learned the hard way by getting rejected and women throwing drinks at me and, fun stuff too, getting laid and shit like that and makeouts and phone numbers back in the day. Stories. Yeah. These poor kids now just have fucking Tinder and Bumble and a bunch of only skanks. So talk to me about Tinder though and how it relates to the modern man and even, young women that are, using these apps and stuff. What are your thoughts on Tinder? What's the Pat Stedman take on Tinder?
Was that funny? I was actually talking to a client about this morning. I mean, it's fundamentally broken at this point. Back when it first started, and frankly, online dating before, back in 2015, right, when it first came out, it was great. I mean, I did a lot of online dating back in OkCupid before it became like some crazy social justice platform. Back in 2011 through 2013, and it was like a great way to meet women, and there's a lot of attractive women on there, and they were normal, right? Some maybe were a little bit more shy or whatever that they were online, but that was kind of like the golden age, because at that point people were still normal. They were still going out, they had friends, they were living life, and online dating was just kind of an ancillary way to meet people. So you'd still go out with friends and go to bars, but you didn't have it on your phone, right?
Yeah.
That was a big part of it. But even when you had it on your phone in those early years, it was okay because people were getting used to it. And I think it's that people were normal. They knew how to live life. As we've gone on from there, and especially with COVID, what's happened is that people have, Tony, I'm banned on Tinder.
I got banned too like 10 times.
People have become unable to basically function in normal society. It's broken people's minds. They're freaked out to go out. And to the extent that they have friends, they're very, very tiny, insulated groups. And so what's happened is that online dating has reflected more and more in that anxiety. So you have a lot of anxious people going on there. And so the algorithm, and then you also, I think, have some skewing, like political skewing with the algorithm, that is very much caters to female ego, because I guess it gets more engagement, right? But you're now having this really skewed situation where more and more, like, only this very, very tiny amount of guys are getting any sort of halfway decent girls who they're matching with. Like I've had clients who are like good looking guys, like, they're in good shape, solid profile, and they either get unattractive women or older women. And they might be attractive women, but they're older than them. It's like, and it's kind of like what is going on with this algorithm that this is how you're selecting people for them.
Well, these women
So
are also, I think, getting kind of delusional and entitled. Like
yeah,
they'll swipe, left or whatever, yeah, left on attractive guys that they would be girly and giggly and get butterflies around it in real life. Like
yeah,
there's a complete disconnect between what they're actually attracted to and just the visuals of it. And they have like no, these girls are like, it's almost like the women are also socially retarded now, where women used to be
yes.
much more socialized. That's kind of with the Zoomer chicks. I think that's kind of dissipated, and they're also now like they're just as retarded as the red pill retards, as far as I'm concerned. The worst of them.
No, 100%. They're super anxious. They can't. Um, they're always like, it's like they're afraid of everything, and
Yeah, yeah,
feel like they're. So it's like they need to go through these intermediaries to be able to kind of modulate the conversations for them. And of course there is this ego aspect to it also, which is that they get presented with some guy who maybe on paper is super super attractive and everything, so they're like, okay, I want him. Well, the reality is that if that guy is even going to see you, he's just going to fuck you. That's
yeah.
it. I mean, there's no sort of realistic pairing. It's all like an ego and entitlement thing. um
Dude, when I
I
used to be on Tinder and Bumble, I would swipe left on like 90 something percent of women.
yeah,
Like, so they're all just fucking gross and fat, and it got worse every year.
yeah. I mean, at this point, I really have to say that there was like a brief uptick of it being good in the very beginning of COVID, because a
Okay.
bunch of like regular people went on who normally wouldn't.
Yeah,
But this is another variable actually, which is that a lot of the more normal, healthy people, when they get on that app, they're like, "What the fuck is this?" And then they
yeah,
get off of it, and so it's becoming more and more of like an insane asylum.
yeah.
So there's also that element.
It's
Um,
a corrupt shithole like Ukraine.
yes, yes, no, 100%. I mean, the kind of rule with online dating now is that, and it used to be able to filter for it much more easily, but you really want to get girls who have only been on the app for like less than 2 weeks. Because if
Yeah,
you get girls who have been on it for months, I mean, they're just zero. Like, it's all they're totally fucked up.
yeah,
So
yeah. Heartbroken, fucked up, jaded. They've been, just whatever the fuck. Yeah, I agree that they have to be fresh to it. Have to be new, fresh pickings.
I'm just gonna seed this right now. I'm seeding it. Um,
Hmm.
there is actually, I'm working with someone on developing a different dating app. So
Cool.
that's the first kind of announcement here. That's gonna break all this shit.
Yeah,
We're still in the preliminary phases of it, but
cool.
it's I feel optimistic about where it's gonna go.
They've pretty much all been like super feminists too. So anything that would be against that narrative would be great. Tinder actually is less retarded than Bumble was the worst of it. But
Yeah,
the CEO is like overtly hyper feminist. She used
yeah,
to be, I think, an employee at Tinder too early on.
right.
Yeah, I got Bumble too is much more effective at banning you. Like I could get around Tinder bans for a while, but Bumble was getting. They started tracking like my IP address and shit. Like they even banned me from Twitter once. Got posted on Twitter. The official Bumble account. I was kind of mocking them because I was posting screenshots of the shit I was saying to girls that would get me laid.
Yeah.
It's kind of asshole game stuff. And the Bumble people were like, "Oh yeah," and they fucking banned me like immediately in my actual Bumble account. I was like, "Holy shit!" Yeah, I think they just because my name Anthony was on it, and I think they were able to identify by Orlando and Anthony or
Mhm.
whatever. I guess there wasn't that many Anthonys in Orlando, maybe a few hundred, and
There
they just
was there
it's
was
just
some
the speed of
employee
it
that,
though. The speed of it, yeah, was amazing.
yeah, you triggered one girl behind the scenes there who really went on
Yeah,
that.
dude, it
Yeah.
was like within an hour. I was like, holy shit, these people are psychos, dude. And all I
Mhm.
was saying is like, I want to come over your face and make you my girlfriend. Like this is standard, kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
stuff. Bumble too, you could send dick pics, which is pretty cool. Tinder, you couldn't send dick pics on Tinder. I think early on you could, but that was before my time.
Right.
Tinder was wise enough to block any kind of image sending. You can only send like
Mhm.
GIFs and stupid shit like that. Yeah, I had fun with it though, man. Back in my heyday with it was 2016, 2017, 2018.
Mhm.
I had a lot of fun with these apps. It was very reckless what I was doing. I've changed my behavior since then, like,
Sure.
quite a bit. I'm in a relationship now. I have an
Yep.
actual official girlfriend, the first lady of the
First lady of the
manosphere
nation.
in training. In
Yeah.
training, yeah, everyone loved her at 21. Man, she made like 400 cookies by hand
Mhm.
for everybody, and yeah, a lot of good comments from people. And I told people to be like very, very raw in what they thought of her with me and stuff like that. The
Well, she's
Fosters.
beautiful. I mean, she's a beautiful girl. I
Thanks,
haven't met
man.
her in person, but I look
Yeah,
forward
yeah.
to that this fall.
Yeah, dude. I really wish you were there last year, and look forward to seeing you back, man, at 21, 100%,
Mhm.
and 22, and even patriarch now that you're a patriarch, your father.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Let's move on to some other subjects over from your newsletters. Enough about Tinder, such a shithole of stuff. Let's talk about your speech actually, which is healing yourself as a man that you gave
Mhm.
at 21 Convention 2020, and I put it out recently, about a month ago, maybe 2
Mhm.
months.
Yeah,
Yeah,
late January, early Feb, I think.
yeah, it hit it pretty well on the channel. People got good views. People loved it. The watch times like super high. People actually cared about it and went all the way through it. So talk to me about healing yourself as a man, because this seems like it's fucking, at least in the red pill wing of the manosphere, even the black pill wing, there's not a lot of like healing going on. It's
Mhm.
just a lot of like theory and different forms of negativity. Those two communities don't get along, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
I like the black pill guys that Tony hangs out with, for
Yeah.
example, a lot better. But
Yeah.
there's still like this pessimism with facing reality, and your healing approach to facing the truth and facing reality seems a lot more white pilled, if I can put it
Mhm.
that way. So talk to me about healing yourself as a man, what you went through in that speech, and why you think it's important for men to face their trauma and become more masculine.
Well, I think a lot of guys have an innate suspicion when they hear the term healing. And I actually think it's a healthy suspicion. I mean, a lot of these words have been weaponized to frankly propagate female narcissism, for being just
Yeah.
totally honest about it. Um,
Heal your toxic masculinity, you bigot, shit like that.
yeah, yeah. And also there are, when I talk about healing, there are two kinds of healing. And they're actually both valuable, but they have different places. And so you have masculine healing and you have feminine healing. And actually, as a man, you might need both of them depending on kind of what your exact issue is. But essentially, um, let's give an analogy. Like masculine healing is more of like the tough love stuff.
Hmm.
Like it's constructive related, and feminine healing is more of unconditional love, right? So it's like if the feminine says, I love you just as you are, the masculine says, I love you, but you need to fix this shit, right? And
Yeah.
so an analogy for this is, if you break your leg, okay, it's nice that your mom or your girlfriend's like, oh my God, are you okay? And it's like, wants to be there for you emotionally. But I mean, if you just have that, your leg's still fucking broken. Because a guy comes over and says, all right, put this stick in your mouth, and then they snap your leg back, and then set the splint so it can heal,
Yeah.
right? Masculine healing in that sense can be tough, but it does help to put you back together. And so there needs to be a balance of those two things. In the speech, though, a lot of what I was talking about, I think I did touch on some of that, but a lot of what I was talking about was the relationship that a man has to himself and its connection to his father, and sort of into the initiatory process of becoming a man.
Hmm.
And that's something that's been really taken from guys today. And the reality is that y as a man, your patterns are deeply, deeply embedded in with your father, to the extent that you either become just like him or you become total opposite of him. But rarely does a man become something that is not in response to his father,
Hmm.
become his own person. And a lot of that has to do with this sort of underlying, frustration, just of not having the relationship with his father that he would have wanted to have,
Hmm.
which ends up being a reflection of his relationship with himself. So I do a lot of inner child work with clients, and you can look at your inner child as like basically a sub-personality unconscious aspect of yourself that a lot of self-sabotage comes from. And so if you have a bad like as we go through adolescence, our conscious mind develops more, and we often develop an adversarial relationship with this child. So it's like the child is out there in the world and he gets hurt and he doesn't, and he feels bad. And then gradually, as your conscious mind develops, it's like, okay, well, you know what? Stop being a bitch. That if we do this, they're going to attack us. So we have to protect ourselves in this way. And that can become a really negative dynamic. And you see that a lot in the manosphere because it's guys who are trying to get better, but they are basically, it's all about self-improvement. But the subtext of the self-improvement is that they're not actually valuable intrinsically.
Yeah.
So a lot of so you can argue that there's like a level of feminine healing here and self-acceptance unconditionally, accepting the child in my, terminology unconditionally. But then there's also this piece of, in order to do that, in order to accept your child, you have to have this sort of reconciliation with your father. And even if your father's not around, you can still do this to an extent. And it's not about the outcome exactly. Like, it's nice if you get a good outcome from it and you clear a lot of bad energy, but it's really just being at peace with him and being grateful and understanding, your father was a flawed individual and he did the best that he could. And what I find happens is that when you have this kind of conversation with your father, where you challenge him on why he didn't do certain things, while also appreciating him, what happens is that the prior dynamic gets deconstructed, and you either meet your father on an equal playing field, or even you become essentially the father to your father. But the end goal of this in either case is that you frankly become a man. And as long as you are continuing to hold this sort of negativity towards your father, you're sort of implying that you're still the child and that you're not able to act as a man with agency in the world. It's all about rebelling against him. So that was a key aspect of, and I go into other stuff as well, talking about initiatory experiences. But I think that's probably the most important part, because I've done that work with clients, I don't know, hundreds of times now. And it's just absolutely astounding. Almost every single time, it just leads to like a completely different dynamic with his father and himself.
Yeah.
So.
I agree with a lot of that. I disagree with some, but it's interesting to hear different perspectives. Yeah, and definitely you're coming from a positive place, and I think you're helping a lot of guys figure shit out, which is a lot more than can be said about so many other dating coach frauds and shit that really don't give a fuck about anything other than their brand and making money, and really like just materialistic, like simplistic bullshit that is just pathetic. So I love that you care about these issues, and you're a warrior for the truth and you're a fighter for it, and I love it.
I appreciate that.
Even when I disagree with stuff.
Well, yeah, but I'll also say this. I mean, and I don't know exactly what the disagreement is, and that's okay. Like, we don't have to get into it. But just to put in a context thing, for a specific kind of guy, he may have this issue where he has a lot of negative self-talk that he's internalized from his father.
Yes.
And so this sort of practice is really most applicable in those scenarios where a guy is very tough on himself and he needs to clear that energy out. If a guy, however, is not really doing anything, this isn't because you might have to have some of this like feminine healing energy. It's not the only answer, and in some cases, it's not the answer at all. I mean, I'm very context related with my work, and there are some guys, it's like, they're like, well, I just want to do some more, inner work, inner healing work. I'm like, well, actually, you just need to fucking do something. You need to decide that enough is enough. And
why don't you sell a magic pill to fix everything, Pat? What's wrong with you? Can I just buy one on your website, dude? Just take the Pat pill.
Exactly. Yeah. I'll tell you, everything's going to be okay. Right. You just have to keep taking it. Take one every day.
I'm kind of amazed with the pill thing that I like actually the pill analogies, and I think they're useful in a lot of cases. They're not entirely, bad, but it's like these people think they can literally buy a magic pill for $20 you slap red pill on it, and people are like, I'm going to be red pill, bro. Women are hoes. I'm red pill. It's like, dude, you just drop somebody $20 and you think you're red pilled. Like, you just bought a cheap trinket, and like you bought like a little bobblehead is what you bought, red pill, a bobblehead red pill, and you think you're
They
like
actually
it's
sell
like
that
a
shit?
key. No, we should though. That's what it is to me when these dudes
Yeah.
buy when they buy a book of some fraud, or they send a $5 super chat, or they buy this little ebook on Gumroad from some retard who can't even get laid. I mean, it's cringe that these dudes think they're red pill, and it's like all you've done is buy the cheap imitation of a red pill, and you get scared from people like me and like you, Pat. They give people real truths that are really like I heard it described once on my channel from a commenter in one of my videos that I was featured in. A lot of the videos obviously are not of me; they're speakers like you and whoever. But he said when he watched my video, it was like he felt like it was the red pill being injected directly into his veins, like intravenously,
Mm,
because I was just so intense with it. And I really don't give a fuck about anything but the truth
yeah.
99% of the time. Everything else, at least, is far beneath that as a distant second. What is true? What is true? What is true? And that to me is what the red pill is. It has to be about the truth, not
Yes.
the imitation or the appearance of truth, the actual, like, real truth,
Well,
factual otherwise.
well, I love what you just said there, and I was thinking, the new Matrix movie, which I enjoyed for some, for certain reasons. I agree with a lot of the criticisms as well, but
Yeah.
at any rate, though, they have this scene where Neo's like taking, he has to take his blue pills every day
Yeah.
to kind of, keep things going, and it just goes back to the fact that the truth, it resonates on a deep level. You don't need to keep hearing it over and over again. Once you hear it, it shocks you to your core, right? But lies and distortions, if you're going to maintain the illusion, they have to be constantly reinforced. And that's this whole thing. It's like, oh, I'm red pilled, but a lot of these guys, they just are continually consuming red pill content over and over again. I mean, let's be fucking honest here for a second. Is hypergamy really that complicated? How many essays on hypergamy? Like, I'm the world's expert on hypergamy, and I
That's
can
right.
tell you that you do not need to write 4 books on hypergamy. You don't need to do it. It's really a very, very simple idea, which is that women select for the best men. It's a natural thing, and they date across and up. It's basically what it is with women, that they're looking for the best men. And guess what? Men do the same thing for women. They want the most attractive, fertile woman. We have our own version of it. And every woman is hypergamous, but not every woman engages in hypergamy in the same way, right? One woman, the second she sees she's fucked up, second she sees a higher status guy, she throws herself at him, right? That's a trauma response. A more healthy, adjusted woman, if her man is consistently on a lower level than other men, she'll push it internally against him to perform better. And only at a certain point then will she leave him, right? There's a difference. It's the same kind of thing with a guy. Like, a guy is married to, he's married, and his wife is maybe a little bit out of shape. And so he's going to ideally it wouldn't have happened to begin with, but he's going to be there and kind of push her towards that or if he's kind of a shithead, then he's married to a woman and he just goes and fucks any attractive girl that comes by. I mean, men have their own version of it. There's a lot of, I'm empathetic to women who have experienced this kind of stuff. They've, by their own
Well,
estimations, been
you've
good
said
wives for years, and then their guy sees a younger girl and fucks her, right? I mean, that is a big pain point
yeah.
among women. That's male hypergamy, whatever the fuck you want to call it.
So Socrates calls it hypogamy. Actually, he tries to give a name to it, to male sexual psychology and male sexual strategy. But what you've done here, independent of what any other speaker like Socrates has done, is you've tried to identify male sexuality and male sexual strategy, and that is kind of forbidden in the red pill wings of the manosphere. Even other elements too. They don't want to talk about it. It's just all about women. That's one of I think the saddest things I've seen happen in recent years in the manosphere, as I continue to try to push forward with positive truth messages, truth-focused speakers, and content that actually matters and actually moves the needle on pushing the community forward. But a lot of the communities become very, very blue pill, what would have been called blue pill just a couple years ago by some of the same guys. So basically, it all just revolves around women now, what women want, their sexual strategy. That's all this crap is. It's actually very female centric. The hypergamy robots that are just obsessed with hypergamy, they're just one example of a couple, but they're obsessed with what women want, what women think. It's all about, like, it's all about, that's why the hypergamy is the kind of like a hammer they have that's going to nail everything in the world, right? And then, even if I can paraphrase Dr. Sean Smith, if I interpret his analysis correctly, he did a 45-minute video breaking down the manosphere's conception of hypergamy, particularly from the Fraud Father. And basically what that guy is trying to do is use hypergamy as a paramount issue in women to the point that they're like hypergamy robots.
Yes.
To the almost to the complete exclusion of other psychological factors like trauma, like their childhood, like their relationship with their dad, like any other number of, pain and pleasure. Like, human psychology is insanely fucking complex, right? We're still at the very beginnings of understanding this, but you have this like idiot cult leader try to convince men that women are nothing but hypergamy robots and there's nothing else to learn and understand, not only about women, but even then about yourself. What is your sexual strategy as a man? What do other men do? What have men done historically? Why do we do this? How does our species operate as a sexually dimorphic species? Like, why are these things important?
Yeah.
Like, it's like all that shit is just irrelevant. It's just women, hypergamy robots, women suck, women are hoes, fuck these hoes, give me $5 super chat. Like, it's just a cesspool of fucking, the manosphere is such a cool thing, but it's also become like this fucking corrupt shithole, like Ukraine, with like rampant fraud from guys who can't get laid and don't know shit. Really don't. It's like pseudoscientific garbage. I mean, someone needs to make a whole documentary. Maybe I'll do that. Just about how retarded all this shit is.
You should do it. You should do it. I mean, I can't think of a better person to do it. You'd have all the basis points to be able to, all the citations are all, they're all there,
Yeah. But you just made a simple point though, that men have a sexual strategy too. And this is very taboo in the manosphere, which is very bizarre, because you think the manosphere would try to deal with this and understand it, but we don't. Not enough anyway.
No. I mean, but it's a really, really good point to emphasize, because there's a couple issues with that. I mean, the first is that when you're only focused on women, that's projection, right? It's projection. But the other part of it is that the subtext is that you're driven by women. So women have the control. So these guys are admitting basically that they're betas who are constantly obsessed with what women are going to do and what women are going to think. They're not self-oriented men.
There's entire shows about this now. It's beyond even ideological and intellectual at this point. It's become physical, like the Fake and Fraud show of Miami. It's just the women run everything. The appearance is that these little dudes run it by being dramatic and throwing off these hoes or something like that, just to cause a scene and get views and clicks, because people are drug addicts. But really, it's the women who run. It's all about what the women think and what the women want. It's become extremely blue pill if 2015 Manosphere was to analyze it. Like, it would have been a shut and closed case.
Yeah.
Now it's insane.
It's like I'm so alpha. My girlfriend lets me have my man cave.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It's like
exactly.
That's where it's at. Yeah, as men, we need to be aware of female sexual strategy to protect ourselves from it, right? And to understand what a woman can do, what a woman is capable of.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, we also have to have that self-awareness, because that's how we grow as individuals. We only become better men when we understand what we want, how we operate our blind sides. Like, I talk a lot about Madonna whore complex.
Yeah.
That's a huge blind spot in guys. I see people in the manosphere talk all the time about, how they want to fuck, all these, they're fucking all these girls right now, but they want a virgin to marry. I'm like, you guys are gonna have some serious, serious problems. You have no idea how your own mind works.
I love it. I've been through these kind of I don't know what, personal struggles, or just kind of like, challenges in my own, how I'm living my own life. Even the past couple of years, things are really getting out of control. As I probably told you, like, I was buying, the 3 packs of Plan B at one point. That was kind of like the final straw. That I was like looking at it in my Amazon ordered list. I'm like, this is really fucked up. And there was a lot of fun to it, obviously, but it took time. And my nephews, really my blood nephews, to really wake me up to like how serious sex was, and like just how high risk my behavior had become for whatever reason, like the challenge of it, the fun, like the dramatics of it. It was this constant stimulation game to keep having higher and higher highs. And I was like, this is going to blow up in my face with a kid who has a mother who's like some piece of shit off of a bar or Tinder or something.
But this is why, you're a leader, Anthony. This is why you're the president, right, of the manosphere. I mean, you are self-aware, and you can see the things that you're doing, and you engage with your actions, and you reflect on them,
Yeah.
and you evolve, right? I mean, none of these people are frankly devolving. Like they're becoming smaller and smaller, more and more caricatured.
Mm-hmm.
And because the ideology, like with any ideologues, the ideology becomes a constraining force on them. They can't, even if they wanted to deviate from it, they can't at this point, because then they'll be, it's just like the Bolsheviks. If you deviate from it, then you're the one, you got to get yourself taken out, because now you're no longer the real red pill.
They'll lose their audiences, their fan base. They are entirely dependent as creators, quote unquote, or authors or YouTubers or whatever the fuck you want to call them. They're dependent on, you're right, committing to that ideology for their fan base. And the minute they deviate from it, that fan base will turn on them like piranhas, like little fucking chihuahuas, like eating them alive. And people get confused sometimes when I do an attack video exposing somebody or something. Oftentimes it's because that person attacks me first of all, but not always. Sometimes I'll initiate an attack on someone who I think needs to be an important truth needs to be spoken, something needs to be exposed. I might have some fun with it with memes and shit, but almost always there's a serious component to it. And the memes are just tip of the iceberg. But anyway, I'm never beholden to my audience, no matter how big it gets. And the bigger it gets, the more tempting that becomes. And most people just sell out. It's rare that someone like an Elliot Hulse, for example, who's super savage and super authentic, gets that big with millions of fans and maintains his integrity and his the ability to author his own life in his own direction. The audience becomes so big and so controlling that they want to control you. And I don't allow that at all. I call the herd. I mean, I'm fucking like grab the digital shotgun and just start blowing digital heads off, because like I don't give a fuck. Like I'm gonna evolve and pursue the truth, and no one's gonna dictate to me what I think and what I believe and where I'm gonna take things. And it's a battle, because the frauds don't have that. They like submitting to that, I think. Whereas I'm like absolutely rebellious. Like I'm a warrior for the truth, and anybody who gets in the way of that will be memed into oblivion.
They like to submit to that like they submit to their women.
Exactly. They're all run by their women. The Rolos, the Donovans, the Sharp Mama, the Ryans, or Rihanna Stone. I love that. They're all literally run by their women. It's really pathetic. And it's I've seen some people finally trying to help expose. I've been exposing that for a while with these guys, but it's really it's hypocritical to such an insane nuclear level. Like these guys who pretend to be these red pill alpha males are super, super beta. They're in unhealthy, codependent, toxic relationships. It's obvious to anyone with game that from an outside perspective, especially if you've met them and seen it up close, and you can see the simping and all over the place. The Sharp Mama, for example, the Sharp Father, his whole channel now, if you look at it, it's nothing but his woman plastered all over it, because she controls more. Every year that goes by, she controls more and more of the business. She's actually the COO or something. She's like a vice president of it, like legally. And she actually does all the artwork and the actual direction of the show. She's really the puppet master of this guy. And the same is true for pretty much every, it's going to differ in the specifics, right? The details.
Sure.
But even the Fraud Father, Rollery Tommaso, is run by his wife. She stalks him. I know, I've seen it in real life in my own home, how she does this like physically on his phone and stuff. It's like crazy. The guy's a complete beta. Like it's that retarded. Yeah. End rant.
No, I mean, it's tragic. It's tragic. And hopefully we'll be able to continue to reveal these people. But I mean, they really are their own worst enemies.
Yeah.
They can't help but make fools of themselves over and over again. So
$5 super chat from KS. Thank you, sir. My thing is, I have a core belief, however deep comfort for beliefs is unhealthy. Not sure what he means by this. Who knows?
KS, could you rephrase that?
Yep.
So that if you're asking a question, that is, if there's a question you want us to answer, I appreciate the $5.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. I'm gonna use that on pina coladas when I become a simp in Miami for the women. That's That's what kind of I've realized too, is that all the fraud, it's actually like multi-layered simping, because
Yeah.
these dudes will simp for these guys with super chats or whatever. The money then gets funneled through YouTube or whatever to the simp. He then funnels the money to the chick. Sometimes we even have it on video, a video evidence of this. They'll
Hmm.
like use the super chat money to buy $200 dinners for these chicks. So really, it's just this long train of simping and beta mail shit. It's amazing. It's like just go to OnlyFans and cut the middleman out, dude. Like,
Yeah.
you know, make it more efficient. Yeah. I want to talk more about sex.
Hmm.
So, what have you seen lately? You get a lot of weird stuff on Twitter. People come at you. You have a
Hmm.
much bigger Twitter account than me, and I'm kind of jealous because it's a lot more fun. The bigger it gets, more fighting and more shit goes on, more conflict.
Hmm.
What have you seen lately with sex? Maybe with cheating in particular. I think you did a couple newsletters on that. Like for example, should a man ever take a woman back after she cheats to put it into a
Yeah.
binary?
Yeah, I talked about this on Tony Bruno's show, which is a great show, by the way. I'm sure a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
guys watching already know that, but just want to give a little shout out to Tony there. Um, I really riled up his audience with this one. So I don't like people have to understand. I don't like giving blanket answers to every single situation. I just don't like doing it because there's always context. I mean, if there was cheating, how did the cheating happen? What other stuff was going on in the relationship? It's obviously terrible. It's obviously terrible. And I can say
Yeah.
personally, I would never accept cheating in a relationship. I wouldn't
Do
do
you
it.
view it as abuse?
Um,
Like I view it as sexual abuse, to be honest, particularly because of the risk of STDs, but also emotional abuse. But
yeah,
I'm not discounting context too. Like I get what you're saying.
no, I agree. I agree. It is. I think it's equivalent to abuse, even if that's not the exact term that I would use.
Okay.
It's essentially the same thing. I mean, like it's actually a good point you bring up. I mean, I hadn't thought of it in that capacity, but um, you know, it is certainly emotionally harmful and sexually harmful to the individual. So
Yeah.
I suppose it fits under the definition. Um, the the reason I give this very, very tiny caveat is that I do know in some situations, if you have a really unconscious relationship, like the guy is just totally, and I'll use the example of a woman cheating, right? Because we're talking to mostly an audience of men, that there is the guy is just in denial about dynamics going on in the relationship. He's sort of not present, absentee, isn't really engaging in his marriage. Let's say it's a marriage. Um, the woman's trying to get his attention. Everything's sort of shut down, and then she's out, and some guy takes attention to her, and she has an affair, and then maybe she feels terrible about it and comes to him and tells him that he had an affair, or maybe she's caught, right? And everything comes out. Now, probably that's the end of the relationship. However, you can make an argument, um, and these couples frankly come to this conclusion themselves, which is that, well, the guy wasn't exactly being so great himself. He wasn't sexually cheating, but he was in his own way maybe emotionally abusing the woman. And they weren't, and there was neither of them really knew how to get their needs met or communicate about what they wanted. And so the cheating ends up like blowing open that paradigm,
Yeah.
and then they're able to from there rebuild a relationship that inhibits that stuff from happening in the future. That does happen. I know a lot of people hate to hear this stuff and they freak out about it, but that stuff does happen. And you also have to.
These sound like the exceptions that prove the rule, because there are some cases where this will work out, and I agree with the mechanics at least of what you're saying, if not the. Uh, I mean, it's so dicey staying in a relationship where a woman's cheated. Like
Yeah,
it's super high risk. But I agree with what you're saying, that the basic, if I can paraphrase it or reframe it, in my understanding, and let me know if you agree, it's like the relationship was already dead. It was a zombie, and
yeah,
now you just start shooting it, and it's like, there's fucking guts falling out. It's like, well, it was already a fucking zombie. Like you had a dead bedroom for 2 fucking years. You weren't getting laid. She wasn't getting laid. She was fucking depressed. You were fucking miserable. Like the whole thing was a shit show anyway, emotionally at least.
Yes.
And so what did you expect to happen?
That's exactly right. And those are the
Yeah.
contexts when this stuff occurs.
Yeah.
And I'll also just throw in here that other elements that contribute to the parties doing this reconciliation is they usually have kids, right? They
Yeah.
usually have a lot of, they're heavily invested, their assets are tied together, they have children together. They have an incentive to fix things, basically. And so, look, I'll reiterate again. I personally do not like that. That stuff was made very clear from the beginning, and I've never been unconscious enough. I
Yeah.
mean, I was certainly not perfect, right? But I've never been that unconscious to have not sort of seen where things were going, with my current marriage. So that stuff was always very clear from the beginning. My wife, is probably more anti-cheating than I am. I mean, it's a real serious thing for her. And
Is that
so,
a Polish thing or a Christian thing or?
I think it's more to do with some other things in her background, basically,
Okay.
that, family, etc. That she has like a very negative, association with it. I mean, it's a bad thing. I don't
Yeah.
have that level of negative association. I'm like, yeah, it's bad. To be honest, like if it were to happen to me, I'd obviously be upset and I would end the relationship.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have this sort of like, fuck you, you're the worst person. It would honestly be like, man, you really fucked up. Like, you really fucked this up.
Yeah.
It'd be more like disappointment
Yeah.
because
I
I
went through
don't,
it myself back in the day, and that was part of the experience, like the major disappointment.
yeah, it's disappointment. And it's also like a level of you ruin this for yourself because, we had a really good thing and you destroyed it. So,
Yeah.
I know I'll be fine, but it's your loss. Like that's how I view it versus the more victim element to it, where it's like you've
Yeah.
ruined everything. I can't like I'll never get over this. Whatever. I'm not gonna give them that much power, but
We got a done super chat, by the way, from Stephen Pope, $5. Thanks, bro. I promise not to spend it on pina coladas for fat women. Anthony, will you please do a show with Pat and Tate? I think he means Andrew Tate. I
mhm.
think it would be an extremely interesting conversation. I do too. That'd be pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be very interesting. What I'll say, and I've talked to some clients about this stuff. I don't think Andrew has a completely different philosophy towards these things than I do, right?
Mm.
Um, but I don't think that he's wrong. I just think it depends on what is your relationship to, women and sort of having children, etc. Um, there are two kinds of successful relationships, and one is very psychological and deep and intimate. It's kind of more like classical, I suppose you could say, um, you know, modern Christian kind of relationship, right? There's a lot of clearing it, like, getting closer and closer to each other and clearing out all your crap with each other. And, you kind of get yourself revealed to the other person. Okay, whatever. That's the sort of relationship that I ascribe to. And those are the sort of women I like to date, that I could develop that sort of deeper intimacy. It's important to me. There are some guys who just don't really care about that. It doesn't matter at all. And when these guys are more powerful, what they're looking for is they're looking for a girl who's going to be attractive and feminine and not drain their energy, right? And if you're a guy and that's what you're looking for, you're not looking to get like really close and deep and intimate with a girl, then that, like, I think that Andrew's approach to things is completely correct. And I actually think in those
For his value system.
for his value system, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I don't know exactly the details or anything, but I do think he has a couple different girls who have his children, right? I think I heard something
Allegedly.
about that.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. I think I heard something
Yeah.
about I don't know, allegedly, right? But the point is that, like, if that was how I viewed things, he's going about it completely the right way.
Yeah.
Like, I actually tell wealthy clients who want a lot of children and just do not, like, they're focused on their business, they're focused on other stuff. They don't care about having that kind of deeper relationship. I'll even tell them, I'll say, look, like, you probably should not get married, or, and I think it's totally reasonable for you to be open to dating multiple women, having, multiple women that have your children. Like, I know some Christian people here will not like that because,
Yeah.
and, look, I get it. I have my,
Tate is like the devil to them. They hate Tate.
look, I have my own views on things, and it's probably more aligned with these other people, but I also know where somebody else is at. Like, what is the point in me trying to tell this person that they're
Yep.
wrong? It's just not my life path. It's their life path.
They could fucking care less too. Like it's
Yeah, they could care less. And I think that this
Yep.
sort of stuff is really, it's unproductive, and it actually makes them like have less respect for you. I think it comes across as desperate for you to try to force your values on other people. Like, you should let them express, like, I mean, look, I'm not tolerant of a lot of the degenerate shit going on today. But a large part of this stuff, and the reason it's become such a problem, is because this isn't like back in the 80s where you had, you had like a gay community, and they go out and they do their thing, and that was sort of it. And they had their own little red light district. Now it's like they're coming after your 5-year-olds. It's a very different situation, and they're doing it through sneaky means. It's totally different shit versus, some guy who's got money wants to live his life in a different way. He wants to live it, frankly, like a lot of powerful men throughout history have lived it.
Bingo.
Well, you got a problem with that? Go fuck yourself. Honestly, like, he's not, like, there's no reason for anybody to be criticizing him in his actions.
Playboys and alpha males are a story as old as time. These Casanovas and whatever the specifics of it are. Yeah, I have no problem. I love Tate. I think he's fucking great. I don't agree with everything that he does, but I understand him. Even when he gets along, for example, with like the fake and fraud, podcasters. I don't really give a fuck. Tate's not stupid. He knows what they are. He just wants to make a bunch of money,
business,
and I don't really.
Business decision.
Yeah, and I don't really fucking care. I'd rather he gets, because I like him and I think he's a pretty legit dude. He's a fucking legit alpha male, not these phonies that fuck old fat women. And he actually has game, is actually strong, is actually masculine. And so I'm like, I'd rather he get these simps money than these pina colada fucking simps that buy pina coladas for all these fucking Miami skanks. I'm like, the money's going somewhere. It's either going to this fat green-haired skank in Miami, or it goes to Andrew Tate and his brother. I want it to go to Andrew Tate and his brother. And if they're going to be hanging out with these guys, then who gives a fuck? Whatever.
And let me just also say this. I think it's a good, like, tying everything together. People need to focus on who is the real enemy right now. Like,
it's not Tate.
It's not Tate. It's not Tate. I find it really, really tedious when people get butthurt about this kind of stuff. It's like, focus your attention on what really fucking matters right now. It's not Andrew Tate having a couple of different girls that he hooks up with. That is literally the least fucking important thing in the world. Learn how to build alliances and focus on what really matters. Andrew Tate is not coming for your children. He's not trying to groom your daughters.
Bingo.
So.
Yep. Yeah, he's not trying to force, Kufid shit into your arm, and he's not trying to bankrupt your country. He's not trying to bankrupt your country and genocide your future children and obliterate your currency to hyperinflation. There's a lot bigger fucking problems out in the world. He's not a feminist trying to, chop your balls off with castration laws. Like, there's all kinds of crazy shit in the world, and he's not part of the problem. I think he's on the side of. I think Tate's on the right side of history, even if he's 100%. This kind of playboy alpha male, loves power and money. Good for him.
And look, I'll just speak very plainly about it. I mean, Andrew was there for me when most of the manosphere was pussing out.
Yeah.
After my arrest. And so, look, I'm a loyal guy. I understand loyalty. And I'm not going to frankly tolerate anybody trashing him. So.
Yeah, good. Yeah, fuck yeah. We can move on to some other subjects if you have more time.
Yeah. Okay. I'm good till about 2:00.
Okay, cool. Oh, good. Yeah.
Although let me go take a piss real fast.
Okay, yeah, go for it. All right, boys, we just got me for now. Let's look at this red pill chameleon, Jennifer Molesky. I saw someone bitching in the chat that she was a chameleon. chameleon in the house. Of course, the dude has a pig fucking face. It's always this, right? It's always some retard. In the meantime, you guys should check out his website, which is here, patstedman.com. Definitely check it out. It's pretty dope. I have heard a lot of good things, like I said, about his masterclass, which is down here. And I can personally attest to his coaching, which you can apply for consult here. And of course, I'm going to sell you guys some more shit while we're waiting. So buy some hats. We do also have, and we're in the process of putting up the animals, the stuffed pigs and the bears and shit. You've probably seen. I got a couple around me. There's like one up in the background. When you guys buy these hats, it supports the channel. It's nothing major. It's much more important to be a member at 21university.com. Attend the 21 convention. Go to our events, 21 Summit, 21 convention, Patriarch, 22 convention, all this kind of stuff. We appreciate it big time. As you guys know, a few months ago, we were booted out of the YouTube partner program, banned temporarily, and took a bunch of money. We ended up getting it back, but your support matters. Welcome back, Pat. I was just slinging hats in the meantime.
Nice.
Yeah. No simping. Don't simp for the frauds, but you can simp for 21 Studios, 100%. Yep.
It's not simping, it's supporting, right?
Exactly.
And look, actually, wearing these hats around is a statement. It's a statement.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you're creating tension when you do something like that. So it's definitely not a ballless move to buy one of these hats and go around with them.
Dude, people love this hat. I mean, I just got this one new, but all the hats like it. Make women great again, 100% toxic masculinity. I wear them especially to the political events like CPAC, for Trump speaks and Ron DeSantis and all these people. And there's people in the hallways that just stop me to take pictures. Like they love it. I had Nigel Farage. He loved Make Women Great Again. Said that right out loud. I took a picture with him. I got to meet him, talk to him a little bit. And you'd be surprised how receptive a lot of probably not like the lefty Democrats, obviously, but a lot of Republicans and conservatives and libertarians, they love this kind of stuff. I think I've been thinking lately, not to go on too much of a tangent, but a little bit, that all the heat from the federal government on the manosphere, whether it's Department of Homeland Security, special agents like Amru Fradl, infiltrating the manosphere to subvert it and destroy it, with this podcast, or the Secret Service putting out a huge document about it just a couple days ago. I think they're terrified of the manosphere positively influencing conservative politics and pushing it to be more pro-man, pro-masculinity, pro-family, because a lot of that's just talking points that are very minimal right now in conservative politics.
Yeah.
Whereas the manosphere is like gung-ho, like be alpha, the better parts of it anyway. Don't be a stupid fucking beta, be a fucking man, be a patriarch, be a leader, don't apologize for your masculinity. It's okay to be a woman. It's okay to be feminine. It's okay to be submissive. There's a lot of messages that we have that they don't, but they're receptive to it. And my theory is that this is terrifying to deep state elements, because if we can push these people to be much more aggressively pro-man and pro-family and pro-masculinity and pro-femininity in women, that could change the course of American history. That's what I'm trying to do with 21 and my wing of what I do.
Yeah, it's basically rolling back the last 60 years of propaganda. I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And that's how they got their stranglehold on this country. I mean, they have gradually, I mean, everybody with a brain knows that feminism isn't pro-women, it's anti-family.
Yeah.
It's, and that the people who are pushing feminism are actually men who profit from the destruction of the family.
Yeah.
So this whole thing, I mean, when you have alpha men, you have feminine women. That's just the reality. Femininity dies in the absence of alpha men.
Yep.
And so, yeah, 100% it's a threat to them. It's a total threat, because these guys, alpha guys, right? I don't want to abuse the term, but it's just like men with sovereignty and agency.
I do. Do you support make men alpha again? I love it, man.
But that is what America was founded on.
Yeah.
Those are the guys. You can't actually have a republic unless you have men like that, because otherwise you just have a bunch of serfs. Essentially, they're not men. I mean, I've made this point before, that they restricted it to men who own property, because that was a very important thing. It wasn't like, even like, obviously excluding all the, the racist elements, whatever, at the time period. I mean, if you were a man who owned property, like you couldn't even be a white guy who didn't own property and be able to vote at the beginning of the republic. And I think that there's good reasons for that, because if you own property, it's like you have a stake.
Yeah. You got skin in the game.
Yeah, this country was founded on small businesses, right? I mean, that's what it is. It's small, family farms, small businesses. That was America. And all men who have that stuff, who are the heads of their independent households and heads of their own businesses, those men are able to think, because they are micro leaders. They can all together muse together about which direction the country should take. When you have a bunch of like fucking losers who own nothing and will be happy, right? Who are just constantly indulging in propaganda. You don't have a country anymore.
Yeah, I think universal suffrage is a total failure. Like I'm not in favor of discriminating against Americans to vote based on the way they're born. That much I'm not. Male, female, obviously black, white, Asian, whatever the fuck. None of that. I'm not in favor of any of that crap, even the male female stuff. And I think that there's a lot of negative consequences to women voting that people didn't consider when the 19th Amendment was passed and all that. For better or for worse, they just didn't. It was just kind of ignored. It was a death of equal rights and responsibilities, duties. But I do think that universal suffrage in isolation as a concept is totally retarded. And the more percentage of the population you have vote, the more retards you have voting, more sheep that just do what the fuck, whatever they're told, whatever the propaganda says, just like whether it's Kufid, Ukraine, BLM, Antifa, feminism, they're more like, we call them sheep, in my opinion, because they really are more herd-like, more animal-like than human, at least psychologically. They really can't think and act for themselves. They have to act in a group.
It's interesting because what is going on right now, it's like kind of like a mass scale MK Ultra, like a trauma-based mind control. I mean, a lot of these people, they've had trauma, and that's built in, that's by design, right? And so then they're looking to authority figures to save them. And then that's what these sort of celebrity media stuff that gets propped up is. And then they become addicted to looking at what the authority figure tells them, even though it actually just causes them more pain. They get more and more abused. This programming only breaks after, unfortunately, people can talk about, oh, well, love will break the programming. The reality is that pain breaks programming. These people are not going to wake up until, family members start to die because of certain things, and because their entire investments are completely wiped out.
Well, I hear playing soccer is the number one way to get a heart attack now.
So it's interesting.
25-year-old soccer player.
Yeah, it's very interesting about that.
Who would have known that playing soccer causes heart attacks?
And just in the last year too. So it's become quite an issue. So the manosphere, I mean, just to bring it back to the point, I mean, the manosphere is grassroots. Men take back their agency, and then when men take back their agency, they create this protective bubble for women to take back their feminine agency.
Yeah.
And then these bubbles become extremely resistant to the state itself. I mean, I take your point about universal suffrage, and without kind of going into it, I'll just say that in many ways that issue is mitigated if you had a healthy family structure, because we all know statistically that women vote with their husbands. So if you have people getting married, and it may become an erroneous point at the end of it. This is the most important thing. I mean, what 21 Convention is doing, the preeminent one in the world, and now it's spreading across country to country to country. It is grassroots inoculation against cabal propaganda.
Yep.
They can't have it. I mean, honestly, I know that you're savvy and you're prepped about this stuff, but I'm actually surprised they haven't done some false flag thing yet with it, because
my event?
Well, I mean, like a bad false flag thing. Like, I don't know if they're going to do some sort of like shooting or something like that. It's honestly.
Why do you think I have so many guns at the event?
Yeah, no.
You have to be totally suicidal to try anything stupid at 21.
Yeah.
Like someone will shoot you, basically. and that's
Yeah.
by design. It's a what do they call it? It's not intimidation. It's like a warning. There's a fucking word for it. I can't think of the fucking word right now.
Deterrence.
The deterrence, yeah, bingo, duh. It's a deterrence, and that's part of why 21 is both the greatest and the safest event in the manosphere in the world for men, because there's a bunch of guns at it. Like I mean, in 2018 we counted like 45 different people carrying handguns in the room, and that's just what we could know, what we knew.
Yeah.
There was probably that event. It was pretty big. That like had like 230 people at it or so. It was bigger than usual, but there's probably another 20 to 30 handguns in the room that we didn't even know about. Some guys like Tony carry 2 guns. I carry 1. I keep it simple. And we have, law enforcement I hire. So like, yeah, someone at some point could try that, but whoever it is they're just going to die. Like,
and that's actually, I didn't even think about that, but I do remember that from the convention. Yeah. It's that wouldn't get anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, it would hit the news and be a thing, but I'm not worried about it. I care about people's safety. The people who are innocent, which is everybody in the room who's not a false flag piece of shit. And, if I have to, I'll do it myself too. I'm not afraid to do what needs to be done to protect the safety of my customers and myself and my friends and my speakers. And that's really rare for a conference organizer to actually carry a handgun. And while I'm not licensed security or anything like that, I don't need to be to stop a violent felony in action. Sure. And I'll do it if I have to. I'll fucking do it myself.
Yep.
And all these frauds have none of the balls to do that. They would never say that. They would never do it. They would never carry. And even the other manosphere events that I have less of a problem with back in the day, like there was Man in Demand a couple years ago, 2016. There was the PUA Summit. There was the dating conference up in New York. There's been like fucking 10 of them. But none of them were pro Second Amendment, pro gun, pro safety, all that shit. They had no care about any of that stuff. These fans for years would be like, hey, bring 21 to California or New York. And I'm like, never, because I can't carry a gun, and I ain't doing it where I can't carry a gun unless it's impossible, like, London and Sweden, foreign country. At that point, I'm like, whatever. But that's why we've only had 21 in America, in Florida, and Texas, because I always carry a handgun when I'm in America. And if I can't, then I ain't fucking doing it.
Yep.
So, and rant.
No, yeah. I mean, so the manosphere is, it's very, very important. It's very, very important what's being built here. And I actually think, I'm an optimist. I'm a realist. I know what's going on in detail, and I know how bad it is, and I know what the plans are to make it worse. But I'm an optimist. I see people waking up. I mean, we get frustrated with the sheep, but it's a gradual process. More and more, every single one of these little turns they take, more and more people get sifted out, thrown out of their little, merry-go-round. Yeah. And in this community is here to pick up many of these guys and dust them off and get them back in the fight on the right side of things. I mean, we will take back the country and gradually the entire Western world. And I have no doubt about that. I mean, we are going to have some pain ahead, no question, but we will get through it. And
but to do this, men need to get their balls back, and women need to get their eggs back, if that would be a way to put it. And the manosphere, I think, is key to doing this. And the political conservatives and shit, even the most hardcore ones, they don't have the time, attention, and intellectual background to do it. They're just, they get the Tucker Carlsons and some of the people, they get that there's like a masculinity problem in America, and it has links to family and stuff like that. But they don't see the big picture of how fundamental this problem is and how it's driving political issues like that we've seen in recent years, and even Kufit stuff.
Well, that's been called the gynocracy, right? I mean, even in the conservative circles, while the left has certainly been the one that's pushed this paradigm, it's the conservatives are, of course, only just a few steps behind, and they're mostly operating under, superficialities, right?
Yeah.
Like and Michael Foster talks about this all the time, but I mean,
love that guy. Amazing.
Yeah, he's amazing. When you talk about, okay, like, well, we need more Christian families, and Americans become more Christian. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? Does that mean, because a lot of what's going on in these churches are completely feminized. I mean, I'm a Christian, but I see what's going on with that. It's tough to find a church that you don't have a cuck pastor, and like the stuff that they're teaching is in many ways completely, I would say, inverted in many ways from what's supposed to happen. Sometimes they mean well, sometimes they don't. But either way, they're both misled, and you have weak leadership. If it isn't even male leadership, it's weak, and
it's run by women, whether physically run by a female preacher, which is becoming a thing, a pastor, or it's just a beta male cuck pastor who's run by the women in the church or his wife or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is the opposite of what Christians should be promoting and should be doing and have for a long fucking time. So yeah, it's sick. It's like run by Pastor, Jack Murphy's, basically at this point. Yeah, there's a fucking guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's at best Republicans promote like beta male masculinity.
Yeah.
Like how can you be a better slave to your woman and your wife? And it's like, man, you're not even close, bro. Like I get that you think they have at least a little bit of lip service to masculinity in some cases, but yeah, it's really, I think I really do think this is one major possibility. The federal government being hostile to the manosphere is they want to nip this in the bud before we can influence them much more so.
Yeah, but they can't stop it. But they can't stop it. They pushed it too far, and people are organically having responses to it.
Yeah.
I good fucking luck, feds. I mean, these guys they're not on the right side of history, and time's running out. And
I'm insanely persistent personally, as you know, Pat. So like I'm gonna just keep like the letter that I'm doing as just kind of the beginning of other legal mechanisms and buttons I'm pushing. Yeah. And I'm just I'm relentless. And they should be worried because not physically or anything like that.
No, not physically.
But legally and morally, we'll say, I'm an expert at making people upset and angry and ruining their day-to-day life. It just causing trouble.
What I'm trying to say is they're just not going to be able to succeed in manipulating and threatening people. Like people are
exactly.
Yeah, that's all we're saying here.
That's why I like guys like Michael Foster. Is like the guy is a really devout Christian and faithful to his God and his religion and his beliefs. And that means, in my view, and my honest interpretation of the guy is he can't be compromised. Yeah. And I'm the same way, gung-ho for my beliefs and all that, and especially for the manosphere and its importance. And you can't bribe me, you can't threaten me, you can't intimidate me, you can't compromise me in any kind of fucking way. I don't give a fuck. Yeah. Like I care about what's true, I care about what's real, I care about masculinity, I care about family, I care about patriarchy, care about women being women, like all this stuff. And there's literally nothing you can do short of throwing me in jail that's going to stop me. Mm-hmm. Nothing. And yeah, I'm not some mass shooter or something crazy like that, but yeah, I'm just super, 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 super persistent at what I care about, and I never stop. Like an Energizer bunny.
Yeah, I mean, violence isn't the answer, and it's not necessary anyway. I mean, the idea is just on momentum on their own. And, there's only so many people who can try to stamp it out. It's not like there's like 100 of us. There's millions.
Another theory, by the way, the manosphere does have millions, but another theory I've read is that a lot of the federal government attacks in the manosphere, whether it's Secret Service or Department of Homeland Security or any of this crap, or even the infiltrators, a lot of it apparently could be to just drum up money for like certain departments. So it's almost like they're trying to use the manosphere as like a money, like, oh, look at this nasty thing, we need more money, like a funding source basically. So maybe it's something stupid like that. I don't know.
Need to fulfill the quota kind of thing. Yeah, that's possible as well. Although I do think that there's probably a mixed influences with it, because it is just, I'm just sorry, I'm plugging in my computer. It's just because of the downstream impact that it has. Yeah. There's one other like little quick comment on this. Because you mentioned the sort of beta male, like the conservative sort of beta male way of doing things. Yep. Well, the issue with it, even if you were to say that they're in superficially, an alliance, right, that they would push back against some of the more degen things, is that it actually is, you can't even hold that line, because the next generation, like the children who grew up under those dads, have not grown up with a strong father. And because they haven't grown up with a strong father, they lack strength in the sense of themselves. And so as a result, they're really malleable to propaganda. And so what ends up happening is that the next generation goes that way. And in fact, the best example of this is the boomer generation, because the boomer generation wasn't like a degen generation overall, but it did have that first, I mean, I know like all the stuff with the 60s, but what I mean is generally, okay, they had that little party phase, but then they all got married and they had their kids. The difference was just that whereas the prior generation was filled with tough, strong men, that generation was filled with a lot of these beta males, but they had nuclear families. But you see what happened is that you remove that from a generation, and then their children, and then certainly their children's are now like cat boys and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Crazy shit.
No, I agree with that. I'm not, I don't want to misconstrue my beliefs or misrepresent them. Like, I'm not in favor of giving these people a free pass because they give cheap lip service to a little bit to masculinity. I'm not into this same team bullshit. Like, don't attack them. Like, no, that guy's a beta male loser. I don't care. I don't care what he votes for, what he likes. Like, I'm going to call what I see, like a spade a spade.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it has downstream consequences to their children, like 100%. They just end up promoting what was, radically left 20 years ago. And that's like normal now. Like, it's just super retarded. To the credit too of Christians, though, I keep pointing this out lately, is they were really worried about the slippery slope in the, I think, late 90s and 2000s with gay marriage and stuff like this. And they're going to come after the kids. And it's like, these people fucking called it, the Pat Buchanan's kind of stuff.
They did call it. And I'll also make this other point, because in case we were coming across as being a little too harsh, the Christian community still remains the strongest bastion of, any sort of masculinity in the country. I mean, there is not, like, if you go into the secular world, it's way worse overall. I mean, you're an exception, Anthony, like a glaring exception as an individual. If you were to look at like the demographic of atheists or something like that, you're not.
Oh, they're super beta and retarded.
Yeah, super. So I mean, the Christians, even for their flaws, I mean, there's absolutely no reason. Like, a lot of the criticism here is constructive. It's like, there is going to be, I believe, a very positive shift within that. And I think a lot of the pushback is going to come from within churches, but it's first going to be men taking back their churches. So anyway.
Well, it's men taking back their balls in the first place, man. Yeah. I mean, it's really a personal and family thing. From there, you get communities and churches and local governments and state governments and the federal government. That, in my opinion, the smallest polity is the family. The smallest political entity is literally the family. So,
and I'll just make a point, which I'm sure the people in the chat already familiar with, but you really, part of the issue with this sort of beta man thing is that you can't, as a non-beta, right? You can't build alliances with them because they're too weak and you can't trust them.
Yeah.
Even if you wanted to rely on them and they say, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Even if they would tell you that, we'll tell you that privately, but then are they going to back you up publicly?
No, they go silent.
They don't. They go silent.
I met a guy at a Republican event last year in Orlando. I go to some of these local ones sometimes to film, sometimes to do, volunteer or whatever. Just kind of, I do what I can to try to push them in the right direction. My hats and shirts alone kind of move the needle just walking around because they're so triggering and they're so obvious. The shirt, for example, the feature is patriarchy. I wear these to kind of moderate Republican events, and people are like they fucking see it. But anyway, I met this guy with a daughter. He said he had an 18-year-old daughter. She wasn't there, and she was about to go to college at one of the big ones in Florida, the big universities. And I'm like, man, have you thought about just like keeping her home and helping her find a husband and build a family instead of going to college? Like, that's like a pretty good option. And he's just like, well, no, she already got accepted. Da 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 da. And you could tell this guy, like, it really shook him that would, and this guy too, by the way, was familiar with a lot of the issues of family court, divorce court for men. So he wasn't like just some total normie. Like he knows I would say he's, if incidentally familiar with some, what we'd call Manister wisdom, that these things are dangerous. He'd been through divorce court himself. But the idea that his daughter would like not go to college after graduating high school and stay home, and he would help her find a husband and build a family, this was like alien to him.
Yeah.
What's been normal for like hundreds, thousands of years in some cases, depending on what areas of the world history you want to look at, especially America though. And like, I'm just some, 33-year-old guy, like, hey man, like, have you ever thought of that? And he's like, Arr. He didn't get mad, but he just got very triggered by it. It was visceral. And it's like, dude, this is the state of the Republican Party. Like, you're going to send your daughter. And I went into it too. I'm like, dude, your daughter's going to get on Tinder, Bumble. She's going to slut it up. I was pretty ruthless with this shit. I actually said slut it up. this
Yeah.
guy's face very, very casually. Like I wasn't attacking. I'm like, dude, it's
No, it's
like I
as
was
you
in
do it.
college.
You just make these little sides with it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, it's a shit show, man. Like she could easily ruin her life or some dude will, and like that's just how it goes, man.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a little story that I have in my head, and it's hard to forget it because it's like I know that this is so common, and this is a guy who had been through divorce court and knows that things are slanted against men and shit like that. It's even worse when you get it when you have these guys who are and these other boomers and shit. This guy was a boomer too. He's probably like 60 or something.
Well, you make a really good point with it. I mean, unfortunately, there's only partial deprogramming for a lot of people. It's like, so something happens to them, and so then they realize that some aspect of the structure and the cultural, milieu is flawed. And so, okay, well, we need to change that. But they won't take that leap to say, well, why did that thing even come about to begin with? And like, how much further do you have to go until you get to the root of it? I mean, when you got the Hydra, you cut off one head. I mean, there are multiple others. You have to get to the core of the entire thing. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you haven't solved the problem. And that's what you could understand. It's like, okay, well, we need to fix divorce court, right? Like that's the problem, that this shouldn't happen. Okay. But then, his daughter goes to college and then gets brainwashed. And
Yeah.
then down the road, she gets married. Does she do the same thing her mother did to him? Right.
Yep.
Same thing
Bingo.
happened again. Like the fundamental problem wasn't dealt with.
Yep.
So.
I think it's like these people. It's not even that. Even with the sheepest of the sheep, not even this guy we're talking about, but much worse sheep. It's like they don't. It's not that they lack the ability to think. It's that they choose not to think. And there's fear is a big part of it. That's what shuts the mind killer. But it's like it does require multiple layers of thinking. So I understand. I've been trying to wrap my head around this lately, but I get why they choose to not think and choose to be lazy because of the fear, or it's intimidating to think in multiple layers at a time. Because then you're responsible for the outcome that you have, the conclusion, and then you have to hold it up in public, right? Like you were talking about. These guys who agree with you in private, then when it comes public time, whether it's at a Republican event, a political meeting for your community, a church, they don't want to speak up. They don't want to say anything offensive. Michael Foster, I remember in 2020 at the Patriarch Convention, he was talking about how he goes to Christian events, and unlike 21 Convention and 21 Summit, they actually give him a list of shit that he can't talk about. Hell, sex before marriage, virginity, like these are just for him would be fairly simple topics that he wasn't even going to talk about. And then he's like, oh, I'm definitely talking about these now.
Yeah.
They're trying to forbid these issues from getting focused on, understood, and resolved. Yeah. And figure of speech, thank God men like him still exist pushing back like that. I want to make a comment too that I've been critical of Christianity lately from a philosophic perspective on my Twitter. That's really pissed off a lot of people. Really got butthurt. These aren't new opinions I have. These opinions are like 10 years old. I just don't talk about them all the time. But I'm as an atheist and objectivist, I would love if all my neighbors were like hardcore devout Christians. Even though I don't agree with the fundamentals of what drives the philosophy at a very deep philosophic level, the values and the what they should be focused on are really good. And I have like no problem with that at all. It's why I have an alliance with a lot of Christians and stuff. And this is confusing to these lazy beta males who don't want to think. They're like, but you don't like Christianity. I'm like, dude, you're stupid. Like, these people are fucking great. I don't agree with the totality of what they believe, but as far as like the top 80% of it is fucking super savage. I love it. And I wish more Christians were like the Michael Fosters of the world and the Tanner Guzzies and the Noahs and the Jeff Youngers and stuff. Mm-hmm. Men with balls, that's fucking so fantastic to me.
Yeah.
The world's a dangerous place, man. Whether it's genocidal maniacs or people wanting to like, fuck your daughter's life up or something and make her a hoe. Like, there's so much, from A to Z, there's so much, dark negative shit that can happen. It's good that people have a philosophy that guides them towards like positivity and truth and life and family. That to me, it means a lot. And I like that's what I like about the real Christians, not these fake, Easter worshipers, I call them.
Yeah. I mean, and look, I'm not a pastor. And so I don't, want to claim certain things that are maybe outside of my element of expertise, but
sure.
I mean, there's been this massive feminization of Jesus, as sort of like, like he was just super compassionate to everybody. Well, he was compassionate, but he was also fucking fierce. I mean, he went in the temple, kick over fucking tables and stuff. He'd rebuke people to their face and tell them you're basically a fucking retard. I mean, in parlance of that time period, he'd do it over and over again. I mean, if you're willing to you're so firm in your own beliefs and your message that you're willing to get yourself crucified to prove a point, that's not a pussy. Right.
Yeah.
That's not somebody who would be afraid to call it like it was.
Yeah.
And what we have right now is that, well, women, I talked about earlier in here, the masculine and feminine healing. I mean, Jesus was both, my perspective. He embodied both of them, and he understood the context of using them. People who were being maybe like judged when excessively, to give them the compassion they needed to be able to heal, and then would throw his own judgment on people who deserved it and who were hiding behind their moral superiority.
Yeah.
But women, this sort of feminist rot that's infiltrated the entire culture, women don't like being called out. Yeah. It's a feral sort of dynamic because it hits right to their core issues. They don't want to have the self-awareness. They don't want any of that stuff. And so consequently, Christianity, in order to evolve, to survive in this sort of anti-male, hostile environment, necessarily, you could say, became more and more feminized so that it could continue to operate as this sort of controlled opposition. So it's like, oh, see, we're still Christian. Well, go back to a church 60 years ago and see what they were saying compared to now. It's not the same Christianity. It's just window dressing. And so anyway, yeah.
I agree with your point too, by the way. I want to move on to sex in a minute before we wrap up end up the show. But you mentioned that the Christianity is still like a bastion of Christianity in the churches and stuff. A lot of them are still bastions of masculinity, at least compared to the rest of the culture. And I think that's pretty accurate. I think in particular, Christianity, whatever the denominations are and all these, which is kind of interesting to me, the politics of the denominations, how they get along and fight with each other. But they're basically a competing power structure that the deep state and the feminists and whoever else, they want to like infiltrate it and undermine it and destroy it. They want to take it over like a parasite or just abolish it completely. Mm-hmm. And they, at minimum, whether you agree with Christianity or not, like they see it, and it is a competing organization for people's belief systems and communities and how they organize and what they're going to vote for. And like, it's a threat to the establishment that wants to continue dominating everything and taking it over into this degenerate, hyper liberal shithole. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm all for it. I hope these people succeed. Their fight, the Michael Fosters and whatnot, and the Jesse Lee Petersons. Yeah, it's sick what a lot of it's become. But I do want to move on to sex.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of your newsletters, I just opened it. It's one of the few I didn't get to opening. I usually open all of them and kind of scan through them. This one is, how often should you be having sex? So I do want to talk about this question in particular, sex in general, for a bit. My answer to your question of your newsletter, by the way, since you emailed it to me personally, right, with the newsletter. My answer is that, in a relationship in particular, you should always be having as much sex as the man wants. He should be leading this. Mm-hmm. And if it's not about dictating it, it's more about the man being the sexual leader, and he gets what he wants because he's the alpha and he's the dominant in the relationship. And this is how things generally naturally need to be. And if they're not, it's just going to be a slip and slide to hell. Like it's just going to fucking fall apart. So some people think this is like, this is abusive and you're domineering, and this is nonsense. Like women might want to fuck, less than you, more than you, but as far as what actually happens, it needs to be you directing course of it. And it also too, I've been thinking that if a woman doesn't want to fuck whenever you want to fuck, then you have much bigger problems in the relationship. And most beta males have no awareness of this at all.
Well, to the people who would criticize what you say, I mean, first off, women are attracted to men who desire them, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like women are very, very much turned on by desire. And a lot of the seduction and even the manosphere has kind of gotten that twisted because everything, it's become like even pickup. I mean, you can kind of see how things slid down the way they did in some elements of the manosphere, because even pickup was really about making yourself desirable to a woman in many ways.
Which is itself very feminine behavior,
Right,
fitting,
right.
form fitting, like a vagina.
Which is interesting why, not to get into too much in the history of that stuff, but how it sort of evolved in cities, which were more feminine environments. So it was a way of men getting laid in feminine environments, right? At any rate, though, so what you have within a relationship, I mean, at that point, a woman is interested in you, otherwise she would be in the relationship, presumably, right? So your desire for her is arousing to her. Even if she doesn't come every time, it's very psychologically arousing for her to have that happen.
She needs to know that you're attracted to her, that you're aroused by her.
Yes. And so the reason, so I think that what you're saying is completely correct. Like you should have sex as much as the man wants to have sex. But here's a caveat. And I think this may be something that a lot of the listeners on the fence get value out of. A lot of men want to have sex more, not because they actually want to have sex more, but because it's a matter of ego and validation for them. And so if a guy is trying to sort of take back his balls and take back his agency, that, he's a guy who deserves to have sex, if he listens to stuff in the manosphere and you hear some guys talk about how, like, yeah, I get, sex every day, or you should be having sex twice a day. And so he thinks to himself, he's like, I'm not alpha unless I have that.
Clarity point. I don't, my opinion on the prescription of like quantity, like it has to be literally whatever you want. If you fuck twice a week and that's all you want, then that's good. If you want to fuck every day or twice a day, that's up to you too. And to me, the difference between these numerically is big, but psychologically and for the health of the relationship doesn't matter for the most part.
Within reason. Yeah.
Within reason.
Yeah.
It really is like whatever you want needs to go. And if that's every day, good. If it's once a week, that's up to you, bro. Especially if you're old, like whatever.
So guys need to really be clear about how much do they want to have sex. And I talked in that newsletter, a lot of it is about tapping more into the actual energy within the relationship. What's the sort of dynamic? If you guys are connected, how much you want to try to connect with her more and more. I don't mean that in like like share your emotions kind of thing. I just mean connect, like be with each other, be with the energy, have there be.
Look at this guy. Look at his avatar. It's like a Lego of a samurai with a gun.
God,
I don't know.
That's so funny.
I love it. I love it.
That's so fucking funny. So a guy has to get in touch with that actual. If you get in touch with the sexual flow in the relationship, then you want to be having sex based on what that energetic dynamic between the two of you is. I don't want to overcomplicate this. It basically ends up being what Anthony's talking about, how much you want to have sex. You're turned on by her, you want to fuck her, but you guys have sexual tensions between the two of them, you do it. It's not that you're approaching sex from your head where you're like, oh, like we didn't have sex in 2 days, I have to have sex today, otherwise I'm a beta. So then you try to force it. And what happens is that it gets all disjointed. Yep. And that is actually why a lot of women, when they hear this at first brush, like, oh, you're just trying to be domineering with the woman. That woman is imagining this guy who's using his ego, using her as a sexual object for his ego, rather than a sexual object for his genuine desire.
Yes.
So that is the big critical distinction here.
Bingo. You do it whenever you want because of the desire. It's want is desire. Yes. And this is it's accurate to your wants and desires, and she has to submit to that.
Yes.
And that makes her happy, and it makes a good relationship. If she ends up desperate and horny all the time, well, whatever.
Look,
I like kind of teasing and torturing women within reason.
Yeah, no, I know, and that's good. I think it's good within reason, because that actually amps up the tension.
Exactly. Exactly.
But women who don't want that, I mean, very often it's because like they actually do want the connection, but it's a defense mechanism on their part. And so you have to once a woman realizes it's a defense mechanism, like her not letting herself receive, it's almost like her rejecting your desire.
Well, she's never had it before either, women like that. That's part of the reason I think any girl who bitches about this kind of stuff, it's like you've never had like really good sex and a really good relationship. Like you don't you don't know.
Yeah.
They have no experience with it.
Yeah. And I do also think that some women, there's like a self-esteem element, like they won't allow themselves to receive that, and they have to clear out that shame that they actually do deserve to have it. And that's something that a lot of women consciously will deny. But if once they get really honest with themselves, they're like, wait a minute, all of this connection and intimacy I said I wanted, now I get if I just drop this, like, I don't have to have sex, I don't have to have sex, kind of thing. It's like, actually, I wanted to have sex. What the fuck was I doing?
Yeah.
And so that's a big shift. I will just make this little last comment though, and I said this in the newsletter. I do think that if you're a young man, like there's a calibration based on your age on how much on a health level you should be having sex. Like, and I think that while we can talk about this, oh, well, you don't have to, maybe you only have to have it twice a week. Okay, fine. But when you start to get beyond like every other week in particular, I mean, at that point, you can say you have no, well, the marriage is good, right? It's probably you guys care about each other, but you're not stimulating sexual tension. You're letting desire kind of collapse, and you're too much on the comfort side. There's not enough.
Slowly, yeah.
Yeah, and over time that will start to atrophy the relationship itself.
Yep.
So
Bingo.
there is a minimum. Like, it doesn't have to be twice a day. It could be twice a week versus twice a day. But if you're not doing it at least twice a month, I think you're really. I personally think once a week is really what
minimum. Yeah, the bare minimum. Yeah, and I think even at those kind of levels too, like you're talking about these guys making excuses for like these low sex relationships. At that point, I would start to think like your nutrition, your diet, you need to get your T levels checked. You need to get like a typical like blood work done, because at that point I would actually worry about your physical health.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Causing relationship problems, and you're like, oh no, we're totally cool. It's like, no, your balls are shrinking up, bro, because you eat fucking wheat and soy all day. And then you're just making excuses for not banging your chick more than once a month or something.
100%.
Yeah. So yeah, I think sex is fucking fantastic. I'm glad we can talk about it openly. And that's how I know you're like a legit dude. One of the ways, if I've been thinking lately about how to spot frauds better, to teach people how to spot frauds better. And if you notice, like all these manosphere frauds, I think you'll agree with this, but let me know. Basically, they never talk about sex in any practical, technical, or even fundamental way. They never talk about anything with kissing, sucking, biting, making out. They have almost no awareness of any of this because they don't do it. Yeah. If they are getting laid even a little bit by paying for it, and Harvey Weinstein kind of tactics and whatnot, like we see now sometimes with these frauds, it's very beta sex. Like, it's not fun, it's not exciting, it's not masculine. There's no tension to it. Yeah. It's like the lamest of the lame, and that's what I think. The blind leading the blind. This is another element of it. Is that, look, these guys, they don't talk about fucking women like in any meaningful way, because they really don't. Either they're literally not, or they're not fucking them in any way that can be that they can then instruct you or even talk about it openly. And that's why they don't, because they have no fucking idea. The sharp mamas and the fraud fathers and all this shit. Like, can you imagine Raul Tomasi banging his wife? Like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, it's going to give you nightmares, but that doesn't really happen because he's a beta male and she runs his ass. The same is true with the sharp mama. The same is true with the fake and frauds and they're Rihanna Stones. Like, can you imagine Rihanna Stone, like, banging his wife really hard and having a great time? You don't want to. I understand. Believe me, I really get it. But the reality is that doesn't really happen because he's a beta male. He's a beta male LARPing as an alpha male on the internet to other beta males. It's sick.
You can see what happens is that they don't have sex, and then there's a point of internal tension where he starts to have his ego kind of hurt about it, and then so he'll try to make a move for it, and then he's going to get rejected. She's not going to be in the mood, and then he's going to throw a tantrum. And like, that's what happens all the time with these guys.
Yeah. Yep.
That it's like, what the fuck, they get really angry, and which is a very common faux alpha thing.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. Where they just emote and emotionally lash out like they're like a little boy who didn't get his dessert.
Tate says it well. Oh, they want to stick their pee-pee in this girl and she doesn't let them. Yeah. I think he literally says pee-pee. He's like, oh, you want to stick your pee-pee in her.
Yeah.
But then they get mad. They get these little temper tantrums. I think you said temper tantrum. Yeah.
Yeah. And then maybe the girl then just like says, okay, fine, like has sex, maybe, but and then, she agrees to give him a blowjob, and then suddenly there's like a new YouTube video about how alpha he is. He got a blowjob,
Yeah, for sure.
That's
This is how it
exactly how it
happens.
happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this guy on Twitter. You probably know him, Rivellino, the
Yeah.
artist.
Yeah.
Rivellino, the Green Lines guy. I love that guy.
Yeah.
But he talks a lot about face fucking women. You need to face fuck your woman all the time or whatever. And I think whether you do that or not, I think men should. I think it's fucking fantastic. But that to me, I'm like, okay, this guy gets laid because if you notice one topic, all these frauds never, ever, 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 ever talk about is face fucking a woman.
Yeah.
And this guy does all the time. He loves it. It's part of what his gimmick to I mean, he's not a fraud or anything, I think, but his ability to troll people is just part of the game. And I think it's wonderful, but it's actually real too. And beta males do not face fuck women, 100%.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
No, I think you're right. And look, Rivellino, he's a smart guy, and he's aware of the caricatured nature of things, right?
Yeah.
With talking about like the green lines to an extreme, the face fucking to an extreme.
Yeah.
But I actually think that there's really value in it for a lot of dudes, because you like, look, I'll be straightforward. I mean, I love getting head, right? But I also love going down. Like I enjoy it. That's anti-Riv sort of thing, right?
Whatever.
But the thing is, like, the point here, you want to get to the point where you're doing whatever you want, right? And I don't think it's bad to go and, you want to give a girl pleasure. I don't think it's a bad thing to say, okay, I want to do this, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of guys, and this is because of all this sort of programming that has basically turned guys into like Pete Davidsons, right? Who are basically, you're really just a bitch with a penis, and she, and she does what you just please her sexually, and that's your only job, right? That's like the best sexual thing for a guy to get under this sort of paradigm that they've created for us. And so what you see is that guys, when it comes to sex, their anxiety, which causes actually performance issues, is entirely oriented around trying to sexually please this woman, right? Yep. And if they can't do it, then they're not a man. She's not going to want to be with them. And I swear to God, Anthony, I mean, one of the things, like, and it's also because of porn and stuff like that, that guys have this fantasy that the girl just really, really wants them, and she's going to be so turned on, and she's going to, come, and even she's going to initiate in many cases. And then guys have this program in their mind, and they wonder why, when the situation happens, that they can't get it up. I mean, look, it's nice when, time to time, when a girl initiates, but the reality is that as a man, you're sexually charged when you're pursuing, right? You're taking the girl. She's yours. She's, to even put it in these very basic terms, it's like, you take her and you're fucking her, right?
You're in attack mode. You're in attack mode. You're going to attack her vagina.
Yeah, exactly. It charges your masculinity. Like you're a predator, right? You're a predator. When the woman comes after you, you're the prey. And so you become powerless, right? Which is impotence. Yeah. So guys can't get it up, but then, this whole thing is about the girl coming to them, the girl validating them. Well,
but they're just wounded and broken. Like it's all just rationalizing their own fucking trauma is what it is.
Yeah.
They should be, if I can, interpret what you're saying, they need to be egg predators. Prey on, be a predator for the eggs. Get the eggs.
Well, yeah. And look, I think once a guy gets used to saying, you know what, I'm going to go in, like, my objective here is to like get please myself. Really. That's what it's about. It's about pleasing myself.
Yeah.
What they find is that the girl really enjoys that.
Yeah.
And then once you have that mindset solidified, then there can be much more dynamism in the dynamic. So it's like, well, you're going after what you want, but now, but now you can go and please her, because now going and pleasing her is what you want. You're solidified now in pleasing yourself on a fundamental strategic orientation that tactically you can go down on her tactically, like, so there's a
You can
lot.
do whatever the fuck you
You can do
want,
whatever
pretty
the fuck
much,
you want
because you're in
because you got
command.
the fundamental orientation correct.
Yeah. Yep.
But what you really want from women sexually is like when we talk about, oh, I want the woman to initiate. It's like you don't really want her to initiate. What you want is her to indicate receptiveness.
Yeah.
That's what you want.
Yep.
That's when you get charged, where it's like she's wearing something skimpy and she sticks her ass out.
Yeah.
That's what you want, because then it's like invitation to attack.
Well, as a man, you want to feel desired too, and I think the manosphere is a big hang up with this, particularly the red pill frauds. And maybe probably some of the MGTOW and the black pill guys too. I heard, for example, you called them retards on Tony's show the other day, which I love. I love it. I love it.
I was talking to them from a position of familiarity as well, and they were trolling me in the comments and stuff like that. So,
but before we lose the point, like, whether it's red pill, Rolo pill, black pill, MGTOW, whatever the fuck, even MRAs, right? They don't want to talk about it, but they want to be desired by women. This is very natural. Every man wants to be desired by, if not women in plural, then at least one woman in particular that you're also attracted to. And these guys can't admit that they have a need to be desired. It's like, oh no, that's needy. It's like, no, dude, you're just a human being and you're a man and you have balls and you want a woman to suck and fuck you and have a good time. Like, this is not fucking complicated, but they overcomplicate it to this insane level of, the keyboard warrior shit and the hypergamy and the fucking never let a woman know you want her back in the old POA days. Like, there's just, as positive and productive as the manosphere has been, there's also been this mountain of like fuckery and in bullshit, not even the fraudulent shit, which is a whole other fucking mountain of shit. Just like this fuckery and insecurity and the stupidity and the blind leading the blind. And sex, I think, is one of the most profound areas that there's just been a lot of retard shit. Guys like you and Alan Roger Curry and even like a Tony Bruno are the exceptions to the rule. That it's just the blind leading the blind who don't know shit, can't fuck women, don't get laid, can't admit that they want women to want them. Like I'm alpha as fuck. I love it. I'm pure blood. Women want to bang me. They're, all this shit. I want to enslave all women, whatever, right? It's fucking great. but at least I'm comfortable with it and I can admit it. And, my girlfriend loves it 100%. Duh. Otherwise I wouldn't be in a relationship with her, right? So I really appreciate that guys like you speak up and you talk about these issues on a regular basis too, right? I do what I can to support it, but seeing the newsletter and stuff, Pat Stedman's talking about sex, better open that shit.
No, I appreciate that, Anthony, and I appreciate what you're doing. I mean, really, you are the nexus of all of this stuff, all these conversations, and you keep it coherent.
Thanks.
It does pull the focus of it in this direction. You kind of cleave off, okay, like this is outside of the bounds of what we should define as productive, right? And cleave off this area, you declare a jihad on it, right?
you got to cull the herd. You got to clean up the manosphere. Do what it takes. Jihad, exactly. It's a holy war of masculinity and femininity. Even, even reaching out. I'm like one of the pioneers in the manosphere for Make Women Great Again. Obviously, organizing a bunch of speakers like yourself and myself and many others to actually talk to women and teach them, mansplain what men want and how feminism has lied to them. Like, these are from a manosphere perspective, this is not that complicated. Like, this needs to happen. And yet, even not only from the feminists did we get pushback, but even in the manosphere, a lot of the roller pill guys and red pill guys and MGTOW guys, even, they hated it. I mean, a lot of guys loved it too. They loved the balls of it, the tenacity. It was hilarious. Like watching the media freak out, puppeting the fake news, right? Flipping the tables. But it needed to happen. And it's like, women. The manosphere can agree that the state of American women is a disaster, I think, right? Worse than it's ever been by a long shot, particularly the past 10, 15, 20 years, right?
I mean, no question. It's getting exponentially worse. Every year. I mean, 10 years ago, like you had messed up women, but you had still, like, fundamentally, I would not say that your average woman was insane. Like now it's really gotten to be quite.
How many hundreds of thousands or millions of American college women are literally selling their vagina on seeking arrangements or even on Tinder? Oh, Venmo me $5 and see what happens. Like, Like
Yeah.
these girls are the average American girl. AJ Cortez actually put it really good in his 2019 Poland speech. You've always had a population of women who are just like degenerate sluts and prostitutes and strippers, whatever.
And I
I don't
think
know.
you need it, to be honest. I think you need it in a society.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Like it's
Yeah.
fun. It's that behavior has reached the entire rest of the bell curve. Like
Right.
what was once a minority has now become normal across at least 60% of the population or 80% in some major way. It's like this is completely unsustainable and we're all going to die if this doesn't stop. Like it's that bad.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll have to jump in a minute because I have a coaching
Okay.
call, but I just want to respond real quick to that. One of the things that I've observed is, so there are always these women, call them the Madonnas, right, who are just not super promiscuous or sexual by their very nature. And then you have this certain percentage of women, and I think it's 10 to 20% on each end,
Yeah.
to varying degrees, who are just, totally promiscuous. And frankly, I actually am not anti these girls. I think that they have, well, first off, they are who they are, right? Whatever.
Same.
But they also, if we're being honest here, they've kind of served a bit of a purpose in the sense that, there's always that one girl in high school who, 10 guys got their first experience with as a result. You know what I mean? Just kind of, in some ways, there's an ecosystem to it that the other women don't have to sort of play that role, and the guys are maybe more than inclined to go with the good girls. To your point, though, you have always this malleable middle 60 to 80% of women who are, to varying degrees, maybe slightly more promiscuous, slightly less, but fundamentally they're based on the mores of society. And the slut has been normalized by society right now. And so all these girls, even if they're not super inclined to want to do it, in a different time period, they would never have done it. They go to college and they're going to have some hookups because that's what everybody else is doing. And I'm of the opinion that a lot of those girls are salvageable, but it's getting harder and harder as time goes on because it just depends on the number of stuff. And we're not even talking about, just the fact that a lot of them are in terrible shape.
You can't undo it. You can't undo history. You can't undo banging 40 guys.
No, I mean, and that's a huge number, right? I'm not even talking anything close to that. But the issue is that, are these girls, if a girl is actually stepping out of that, there needs to be some serious self-awareness and reflection. I do see more women doing this. I have to say that. I do see more women coming to terms with it. And while I don't think that you should ever, on a blanket level, just simply accept that a woman's changed, I think it's constructive to see that you have women who are, I'm not saying it's the norm yet, but you do have some women who are legitimately becoming more of like, look, this was degenerate shit I was manipulated into. I don't want it anymore. I don't want to be a part of it. And to their credit, they're open with guys about their past because they understand, like, and that's not the average woman by any stretch of the imagination. I'm talking more about a trend I see growing where men and women, because I want to be also a little bit fair to some of these girls. Like, they are being, like, you're 18 years old and you've been fed this shit all the way throughout your life. You haven't had any father or mother, frankly, like, women are more policed by other women than by men at the end of the day.
Slut shaming.
To teach them not to look like a harlot, right? Or to engage in this behavior. Everybody's having to pick up the pieces and put it back together again. And so while I urge men need to be discerning, they need to understand the woman they're with, I do think it's reasonable to have compassion, especially if you yourself have thrown some stones, if you've been in a glass house yourself in terms of some of your own behavior.
Knock on wood for me. I do agree with you. I just, my only caveat would be, I agree with you, like, sincerely in a large part. Only caveat is if these women really want to own their mistakes and these things and come clean, that's good. But where is the action in terms of saying, who are they going to settle for? And the reality is they want to bang all these guys. okay, they've escalated now to the next stage of consciousness, as you might put it. They're owning, they're taking responsibility, but they don't want to let that pan out to you're going to get a masculine beta male at best. Some guy who's legit alpha is probably not going to wife you up. Why would he? Like you've made real mistakes, and those mistakes have consequences. And that's where I'm not seeing that yet. That kind of like, look, you don't deserve that great of a guy because this is your history and it's pretty bad.
Yeah. You know I mean? And I'd also just say that these women, one of the things you always got to look for is how long have they been celibate since that period?
Yeah.
Like if a woman like was fucking all over the place and then 3 months later she's like, okay, I'm not doing like I've been celibate for 3 months. Okay, like let's give it 3 years and let's see where you're at, because there hasn't been a real genuine shift perhaps. But anyway, I really do have to go.
Thank you so much, Pat, for your time. 100%.
I appreciate it as always, Anthony. I look forward to it, and
cool.
We'll speak next time.
100%. Thank you, Pat. I'll close out the show and I'll see you next time.
All right, see you.
Those of you watching still tuning in here, over almost 3 hours of showing today. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Please hit like, hit subscribe, leave a comment, like a regular comment, not just a chat. Regular comments help the videos go viral. Share it on your Twitter account, Facebook, with friends over WhatsApp, chat, text, whatever. I appreciate it. So does Pat, the speaker. He'll benefit. The channels will benefit. Men will benefit. Women will benefit. Whether they're virgins or skankaroos or anything in between. Super Saiyan skank, for example. They need to hear this kind of content. They need the truth. And it's one of the few channels in the manosphere, in the world, let's say, putting out real content with real ideas and real truth, man. Do check out Pat Stedman's website. That's patstedman.com. He has coaching. He has a blog. He has a masterclass. It's a video, of course. It's pretty cool. And check that out. He was unfortunately arrested by the FBI last year, and he's still facing prosecution for that. My opinion is completely fraudulent bullshit. They need to drop that against him and everyone else involved with that, or 99%. I'm sure there's some douchebag somewhere that deserves some time, but 99% of it's just fake news garbage. So do check him out, support him. He's got a kid to support, a wife, all kind of cool stuff. And support 21 Studios. Go to 21studios.com. Check out our events, 21 University, the store. Get your hats. They're for alpha males only. Beta males do not buy the hats. It doesn't work that way. You got to be alpha male, wear the hat. All kinds of cool hats. With that said, I appreciate you guys' time. Peace out. I'll see you next time, episode 161 of the Redman Group.